is one of the most disgusting and heinous things I think I've ever heard in my life. I don't know about you, but I actually love men enough. I want them to be alive. I can't actually love a corpse, okay? I don't.
So I want to address something she said. Well, first of all,
I was the one that was addressed, and I was the one that got cursed out. So you might want to wait a minute or two. Okay, so in any case, basically, there are just things that are attractive in men: being physically strong and being capable of ending an aggressor's life. That's it. Would I throw my baby son in the way of a bear? That's honestly retarded. I don't know how you get from point A to point B. Also, I'm pregnant. I don't know anyone else who's married and pregnant on this panel. So maybe that's why you're so dysfunctional and online calling into a panel right now. Maybe you just suck.
You dumb cunt. I have kids.
Okay.
The point remains.
Oh, I'm sorry for them, because then their mom is
Stop, please, just stop.
Masculinity is defined by traits such as independence, dominance, maintaining control, and providing protection, to name a few, while femininity exudes traits such as compassion and submissiveness. I agree with the theory of compatibilism opposed to raw equity. Femininity complements masculinity in a giant cultural dance. Gender roles are inevitable, good, and informed by immutable biological characteristics. The reason why, in general, women will always be better suited for childcare is because women need to recover following a birth, men can't breastfeed, and due to testosterone's effect on the brain, men tend to be less suited to intimate, nurturing roles. This, and plenty of other examples, along with thousands of years of cultural construction, are obvious. However, there is a crisis in masculinity. On one hand, you have the current cultural zeitgeist, which defines the traditional man as bad, sexist, and adversarial. And on the other hand, you have snake oil salesmen peddling false masculinity defined by manipulating women and using them to hurt them, yourself, and everyone around you. Both are wrong. I advocate for an alternative, a true masculinity that rejects lizard-brained impulses, such as basing our value on what women think of us or sexual conquest, and instead developing a masculinity based on the higher order level values that have classically defined masculinity: independence, capability, and dedicated fatherhood.
Thank you. A little long-winded, but we'll get through it, buddy. Thanks for being here. Lactoid is great. He's one of the members of my community. We'll love to see it. Thanks for being here. Next up, Madam Genevieve, please.
Hi, guys. I am Madam Genevieve. You can call me Genevieve or Jen if that's easier for y'all. I am a sex-positive feminist and sex worker, and I am a big advocate for equality, but I also don't deny that there are differences between men and women, of course. I still think that we can work towards a lot of the traditional feminist ideals of equality. And I think that there's a lot of value to outliers being able to explore a lifestyle and a expression beyond the traditional gender roles. I think that those work for a lot of people, but not everybody. So I think that we're moving in a positive direction in that regard.
Okay, thanks. Genevieve, love to have you. Love to see you. Thanks for being here. And we'll get into it in the open, I'm sure. Allie, please, go ahead.
Thank you. Hello. So, couple things. I'm a YouTuber. I am also a wife. I am about to be a mom for the first time ever. Active advocate of people moving to the Midwest because the cost of living is high, and I think everyone's missing out by not being in the wheat fields. So everyone should just, have a mass exodus and come out here. I promote trying to bring back the nuclear and the extended family, and I am here for modern women who have traditional values or what that would look like, because everyone wants to be, traditional, but we're past the Industrial Revolution. So the definition of that is shifting, but those values and those ideals are still pretty useful. So that's what I do on my side of things over on YouTube.
Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for being willing to come on and discuss your point of view. We'll get into it as we go. Last but certainly not least, Destiny, please.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of people that are feeling lost and without purpose. I don't think that it is healthy to frame these conversations constantly as a crisis of masculinity, because I feel like it always sets us up in a male versus female paradigm. And I think that addressing all of the issues that men are facing as being oppositional or adversarial to women is destroying men's brains. I think that some of the people that are probably the least equipped to deal with the world are people that are pursuing red pill content. And I think that the second most least able to pursue positive positivity in the world are probably people that massively consume red pill content. So I think that the idea that we need to continue harping on male masculinity, like that's going to fix things or make people better or do anything, I think is a red herring. And I think instead we should probably work on alleviating the broader issues that we feel in society that are improving everybody's lives, rather than setting up this weird male versus female paradigm for how to talk about issues.
Fair enough. And with that, feel free to get into it. If you have troubles getting in, please let me see your hands. Otherwise, start the show, and I'll be interjecting with questions to kind of clarify things and maybe drive discussion along if I feel we're getting off track, or frankly, if I'm bored. So continue, please. Wonderful. Not all at once. Oh, well, I guess I'll start with this, right then. So we can all acknowledge, I think, that society is changing and how we view each other and how we view gender norms and how we view gender roles and things like that. There is, I know you don't like to refer to it as a crisis of masculinity, but there does seem to be something changing and going wrong, right? And so I guess I would ask, in regards to both men and women, right? Do they need today that they don't seem to be getting? What is lacking in either how we talk about it, how people interact in these spaces? What are we lacking? What are we missing?
I think we lack perspective on how we are all conservative and liberal to a degree. So we're all conservative about the things that we want to keep, and we're all liberal about the things that we want to change. And I think that we took a lot of ideas from academia that were theorized that wouldn't really play out well in reality when it came to intergender dynamics. And so when we removed some of these, what would be considered now more traditional gender roles, gender facets, we never considered why they were there in the first place. So
can you give me an example of one of those that you say we were removed?
Yes. So one thing that I think has been misconstrued is actually through anthropology. Margaret Mead, she was an anthropologist. She was one of the first female anthropologists to begin with. And so she broke some glass ceilings, also broke a lot of hearts along the way, both men and women's. So one of your first bi chicks of all time. But she went and observed other cultures and found that they had multiple genders. But she did observe a finite number of genders. So I guess my understanding is when she came back to American academia, she basically tried to say that gender was a social construct. And that it made sense to a degree, right? There is masculine man in most cultures, masculine man, feminine woman, feminine man, and then masculine woman. But that doesn't mean that it's completely fluid. Like the non-binary thing, I think that was extrapolated from her notions. So we got rid of these, binaries that most of us probably fall into in one way, shape, or form. Or some people are still working to get rid of these things, and they might have had inherent value in the first place. They might not have even been bad. So my question is, why are we trying to get rid of or change something that might be beneficial, useful, romantic even?
Are we getting rid of that? Do we feel like that is being removed from society, gang?
Where are your strong red pill hates feminist people? Where are they at on this panel, Wick?
You know what? I'll be the strong hates red pill.
Oh my!
Feminist.
Now moderator has to play.
I'm not a feminist. I mean, I'm not.
You're the strongest feminist here, man. You do extreme. Well, except for maybe Madam Genevieve. Well, yeah, you're an empowered woman online, being hyper masculine and hyper intellectual, arguing and debating people. You might be the highest testosterone in this whole room right now.
I don't see how that makes me feminist. I think that could be a consequence of capitalism and being past the Industrial Revolution. I don't think this has anything necessarily to do with Susan B. Anthony or Margaret Sanger. I just literally think that capitalism being done with the Industrial Revolution, that's enabled me to have this ability to be online. And also like Christian principles and values where women have been given, I guess, more autonomy than in some Eastern cultures.
Well, okay, Industrial Revolution is like 1700s though, right? Women haven't been working since 1820 in the same capacity as they are today, right? Mm-hmm. So I do think you bring up something interesting though. Okay, if no one else wants to be strong, I'll throw this out here, okay? And then you guys can tell this. This is what I feel like has happened to some extent in human society, okay? I feel like over the past 50 years, I think that men were socialized in a certain way to be masculine. Part of being masculine, part of the role that you fulfill in society was working a job and being productive. Women were socialized to be women, and part of your job was essentially to work as a cog in a man's life, to where you took care of the household and empowered him to go and pursue work. That was generally the role of the woman. So you take care of the family, take care of the house. And this worked insofar as a family structure was concerned. I feel like something that's happened over the past 20 or 30 years is women have evolved significantly, such that not only were they socialized with all the feminine aspects, they've also grown into these roles in terms of taking care of jobs. Like now they can work, and now they have reproductive freedom. So they've like basically encapsulated both sides of the gender paradigm, and men are kind of left out here with only that masculine paradigm that's not enough to appeal to somebody in a relationship anymore. 50 years ago, a woman might say, well, what do you bring to the table? And I say, a paycheck. Now if a woman says, what do you bring to the table? It's like, a paycheck, I guess. And the woman's like, I don't need your paycheck, and I can without having to worry about getting pregnant. So I don't even need you for sex because I've got birth control. I think that the problem right now is men have to figure out a way to offer something that women actually want, because in a relationship where you're going to get pregnant isn't a requirement anymore, and paychecks are something that women can earn.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't disagree with that at all, but the thing that men aren't bringing to the table is masculinity, though.
But I disagree. Women have
Yeah.
all the masculinity, right? They work jobs and they can provide for themselves. Having like
if you think that masculinity is solely tied down to income, I think that that's a really narrow view and understanding of masculinity. I think there's much more than that. That a man could bring to the table, and like that is probably what most men are missing, that are second class in their relationships, if they're even in relationships at all. Certainly involuntarily celibate men, I think very few women would look at them in public, some of the ones that we come across in the grocery store, and I don't think we would find them to be masculine at all.
Yeah, but
that's
the problem
what's
is
missing.
I think
and it's not all women.
But your brain there is going to be rating on a curve. I think that's the issue. And this is the thing, fundamentally, this is what I disagree with Red Pillars, is they say, okay, listen, I understand that men are masculine, but women are masculine now. Now you need to be hyper masculine. Women have evolved by embracing their masculinity as an opposite to their femininity, and men are supposed to evolve by being even more masculine. I think that can work for 1% of men, but like we're grading on a curve. Not every guy can be 6 feet tall. Not every guy can be shredded. Not every guy can be earning 6 figures, massive income. By just pushing men to be, you got to be even more masculine than you already are to overcome the successful bridges that women have made to their masculinity. I don't know if that's possible for most men to do. I think you can hit like a 1 to 5% of men that could do it, but most of them are just gonna be like, well, fuck me. I'm fucked.
Well, I'm not trying to like dominate or anything like that, but I think that's insane, right? So what you're saying is probably what a lot of masculine women ask for. Well, I want a man to be my complement in life, but I'm not willing to soften up at all. And good luck finding a man like that. He has other options, right? So I don't think that men need to be more masculine for masculine women. I think that women need to embrace their feminine parts that they are often in denial about, and allow men to be masculine as well. I mean, that's the only way that it's going to work. It's a yin and a yang that works together. If you are just masculine as a woman, you're going to attract a feminine man, and then you're going to complain about him 10 to 15 years down the road.
I don't think women want to do that, though. If you're a woman and you're empowered,
that's your problem.
Well, but then the solution is just broken then, because women aren't going back to the kitchen. They're going to keep working, and women aren't getting off birth control. They're still going to want to have sex without being locked in a marriage. That's never changing. And to tell a woman that basically, like, okay, listen, you're doing too well by embracing what were traditionally masculine things that we thought only men would ever do. You need to like stop doing those things and go back to being a woman that doesn't do those things. Realistically, that's just never going to happen.
You can be a woman who works 40 hours a week and be feminine. Like I'm very confused about your understanding of masculinity and femininity. Like it crosses all cultures, all religions, and all time.
Let's try to like narrow in on this. Like it looks like we have different views of what femininity and masculinity is. So maybe we can drill down on that a bit. And I just, again, open to the whole panel here. What is a masculine man to you? What are some characteristics of a masculine man, and what are some characteristics of a feminine woman? Ali, you mentioned that feminine women can still work 40 hours a week and be feminine, right? So I guess, are there things you can do as a woman that are not feminine? I guess I would ask you specifically, and then to the rest of you, same question: masculinity, femininity. What is it to you? So go ahead.
So masculinity and femininity is within all of us. You'll find moments where you go in between yourselves as men. I mean, even lactoid. I'm sure you've had your softer moments in life. So masculinity is more of a penetrative, show of force out there in the world. So if you insert yourself in situations as a woman, or if you assert dominance as a woman, that would be a masculine trait. Which isn't inherently bad. It depends on the context of the situation. You can do it with tact, but I would say that would be a masculine thing for a woman to perform.
I would agree with that. I also want to point out the fact that this is a question. I don't understand the problem with calling it a crisis of masculinity. I think it is, especially when we're having a difficult time understanding what it is. It doesn't necessarily have to be oppositional, adversarial. It can be compatibilistic. You can have a situation where, we're talking about, how do men discover themselves and how do men discover masculinity without having it be at the detriment of women, but more about how can we improve ourselves. And so, what makes a masculine man? What makes a good man? Well, I think there is one of the reasons for the crisis is you have some people. I would point to some to perhaps to name drop like Andrew Tate or that irk of people who I think are sort of bastardizing the concept and using it to push things, a false masculinity of just like sexual conquest and getting laid and all that stuff, as opposed to what I think is a more important, putting aside the lizard brain, something more important and like foundational, such as being independent, right? Understanding what your place is and discovering that. Now, how does that look? Well, I mean, I think part of it is at least having the goals of being successful in the workplace, taking care of yourself physically, learning to improve yourself through becoming more charismatic. All of these things that I think are critically important.
I just for you two, I want to push harder. Give us, what do we mean when we say masculine? Give us some examples. I want to know, because penetrative in the world is quite nebulous. What is that? What do we mean when we say masculine?
It's just being forceful, right? Like women are, femininity would be considered more submissive, more docile, right?
Can you give me, when you say,
there's context.
Yeah, when you give a trait, give an example. What do you mean when you say forceful?
Okay, so let's say that I'm in the workplace, actually in prior service military, so I can talk about that, right? Okay, even though I was in the military, there were times where I was the best leader in the room, just among the enlisted folks, even though I was a woman and there were men in the room. But it was very obvious that I was more capable of the situation. So I would just go ahead and take charge because I'm trying to go home at 5 o'clock. I don't care about these other people. I'm gonna do what I need to do to get the mission done. And I would do that. And that was considered a masculine trait. And it's completely okay. It made sense for the context, but it did have some consequences romantically, I would argue. So does that help? Does that clarify?
Well, yeah, but I feel like you're giving me an example in my direction, though. In that, like, this was a case where... Oh. Well, because it feels like, so being assertive is a trait that men or women can be, but as women enter so when I tie it back to the job thing, so you say that just talking about the job isn't the only thing for masculinity. I feel like a lot of the other things that we talk about stem from the job. So when we talk about like assertiveness, there's a reason why a man is assertive in a household. It's because he's the one that has to suffer and grind to earn the money to support the household. So when we say like a man is a leader, of course a man is a fucking leader. If you want to ask for A, B, or C, and I'm the one earning the money, I'm going to have a huge say over that. I might have the final say over that because it's my body, it's my time that's going into it. But if a woman is working, that relationship is fundamentally altered, right? If a man was bossing you around in a military setting, a man came into a village or whatever the fuck, how we would imagine that, a military person, a civilian, then he would have that authority over you. But because you're in the military now working that job alongside the man, that authoritative, assertive position is threatened due to occupation, which I don't think is bad, by the way, but I'm the feminist here, so yeah.
Well, I think this is my confusion. I think this is an American perspective, that we think that because women work that they can't be feminine. It doesn't make sense because majority of wives are in fact working. So what their man doesn't get to be the man of the house because she's contributing to the household income, and typically he's out earning her anyway. I think that this is very much an overthought and also very reductive of masculinity. I can give other examples of masculinity too. Like my husband is more than a paycheck.
Sure.
And I hate to like, draw examples off of my relationship, but in my opinion, like my husband is, I would say like the most masculine man or one of the most masculine men I've ever met in my life. But there's other things. Give some
examples about how.
Yeah. So he's trained in hand-to-hand combat. He did that for, I want to say, over a decade, and he's still familiar with it. You can see the way that he walks on his feet. And he's not tall either. He's 5'8". He's trained with weapons. He's constantly sharpening his skills with weapons. He goes to a men's shooting group, which is a very masculine space to be in. I do not like being invited. Other things that he does, I can ask his opinion, or I can ask him to make a decision and he'll make it for me if I'm feeling uncomfortable with my interpretation of events. Like those are masculine things. That's protection aside from provisioning. He does the provisioning as well. And also, just repairing things around the house, which, women can do that too. But I just find that for some reason we rely on our men to do that more.
Can I ask, just if I may interject here?
Sorry, because I want to bully her.
Oh, you can bully her in a second.
Okay.
But are men a failure? Is it is a man a failure when he fails to be masculine in these spaces? When in your military group, for example, when none of the men took charge, right? Have they failed as men?
Yeah. Yes. It was so bad. Because I guess the civilians, like, you guys think that the military is this great, awesome place. All you need to do to get in is not be obese and not go to jail and have a GED. So this crisis of masculinity is also an issue within the United States military, to the effect that it even affects leadership of officers that are complacent and will push whatever agenda gets shoved down their throats by a general instead of standing up for their lower enlisted or like their lower officers and taking a stand. It's a bunch of yes men. It's a huge issue. Yes, they failed as men. If I have to do a man's job, yes, you failed as the man.
Okay. Madam Genevieve, real quick, I want to get you in here. Do you think if your man, right, if someone, your partner or whatever, fails to be assertive, have they failed as men? Would you agree with this take, or what do you think, Madam Genevieve? I want to give you some space here.
I think that obviously we generally have the association that it's masculine to provide protection, right, or to protect. That's generally hand in hand with being a provider. Like, I think those are probably the two most common things that we look to in a traditional male. And I guess for me, it really does depend on circumstance. I think that.
Well, using that circumstance, right? Using that example that Allie gave, right? If in a workplace, right? Workplace setting, no one's taking charge, none of the men step up. Have they failed as men? Would you agree with that or disagree?
I would disagree. I think in a workplace, having worked in corporate America, I don't look and wait for the man to take charge and be the leader. In fact, that was a role that I took on myself a lot. And I don't know. I guess I don't look at that necessarily as it doesn't have to continue to be a masculine trait in the workplace. I wouldn't look at it as a failure.
Okay.
I think that because it was the military, it's different. Like, this wasn't like one time or a handful of times that I had to take charge of a situation in the military. It was often. There were even times where I was physically stronger than some of the men in the room. Like, it's absolutely embarrassing. But there were good male leaders. Do not get me wrong. I'm just saying it happened too many times for me to think that there is an issue. That you have to be comfortable asserting authority as a man in this world. It doesn't make any sense for me. Like, we need y'all to be leaders as well.
Especially in a family context. I think that's so important here because of the biological element to that.
I feel like, so when we go back to, so I asked you the traits for masculine things, okay? So here's a couple of things that I have to say about this. So one is, I think the protection thing is a cope. I think that when we talk to women and we find out, like, why do you like men? If you're trying to make a value proposition, you're trying to make an offer to a woman, and as a man, you're like, well, I can protect you. Like, I don't think it's a very valuable thing where it's like, okay, like, I'm a woman, I'm navigating like the dangerous streets of DC on the daily basis and I need a man to protect me. Like, I think that's kind of like a nice fluffy thing on the side that maybe you could feel a little bit safer. But I don't think that like just being a protector is going to be like, I'm very strong and now I should be able to go out and get a wife. I don't think that's ever going to happen traditionally. Or I'm generally
those
society.
are maybe used to be valued more.
Yeah, maybe they used to be valued, but like in today's society, like I don't think that like selling protection like you're a bodyguard is a thing. Also, a second thing, I would even say personally, I'm going to personally attack you, but I want to bring this up personally because you brought up your personal life. I don't know if you necessarily value those things in terms of like being like a personal important buy-in to you because your husband is so much older than you. Isn't he going to fall out of physical capability of providing this protection if he ages out of being able to do hand-to-hand combat or weapons training and everything? Like, isn't that something that at some point you might actually be the one in that situation? I'm guessing you were in the military, you could probably handle a gun. You probably know a fair bit yourself, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, so here's the thing, right? He is older. Now, he's still very strong. I think that also we don't see a group of men that are from age 50 to 70 that are physically fit, that have been working out for decades. They totally exist and they're capable. The only issue that I could really think would be eyesight. Even strength-wise, you're able to retain testosterone. We have a very specific dietary guideline that we follow in our house, so testosterone's fine, but like he can still be sharp as long as he can see. He can still fire a weapon. He trains with men that are much older than him often. However, like, will there be a time where he can't protect me? Yeah, probably. Hopefully I'll be blessed with a son who would also look to protect me. Or, and I'm not kidding. Like, this is what life is for. This is what men
you
are
really
for.
you really think about this? Like, I need a son to protect me in the world. Like, is this actually like a day-to-day? Where do you live? What Midwest? Oh, come on. Your son's not going to protect you from a scam on the phone from some Indian guy locking your OS down and saying, I need $50 or I'm going, like, come on. This is not really what your sons are for, right?
That's real. That happens to old ladies all the time.
It happens to old men too, though, no?
Yeah, well, I mean, I might only have daughters, okay? But aside from that, I would think that my husband has the foresight to be like, look, honey, I can't really protect you like I used to. We need to get you going to the range. And he's going to take me. Like, this is all planning here. Now, if he gets hit by a bus tomorrow, like, okay, I'm SOL. But, you know, I don't think that this is like a cope about men being protective of women because it's about what makes you wet, right? And, like, will we go for a safe man who can't defend his family physically or with weapons? Yeah, probably for security reasons. Am I going to be able to be faithful to him 10 to 15 years down the road? I don't think so. I think that's a really big ask.
I guess really? When I think of the traits that you listed, there was, broadly speaking, there was the protection thing, which is, I feel like that can't be a major draw. Just as from what I've seen of you, I feel like there's probably got to be something more there. And then the second thing you listed, I thought was really interesting. You said you can solicit advice or feedback if you've got like an issue, like making a decision or something. I would argue that's a feminine trait. Being able to listen to somebody, being able to be emotionally or intellectually responsive to somebody's needs, and then giving feedback based on what they're saying. I think that largely speaking, that's considered like a more feminine thing. Like a woman asking her husband advice on some particular thing, I don't think would be a traditionally masculine thing in most men's eyes. Not to say that it's good or bad. Oh, well, I would consider that good, but...
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to give other people time too.
Sure.
Yeah, so I understand we're not like living in caveman times where dinosaurs are not, you know, whatever the fuck's chasing after us. But you agree that there are dangers like in society, right? And there is like a physical difference here. And so those physical differences sort of inform the reason why men have the roles of being the protector. And doesn't that make sense, right?
I don't acknowledge that. No, I don't acknowledge that.
You don't
think like at the bar some guy is being aggressive and like
I think the vast majority of women are not going to be in scenarios where they need like a man to protect them unless they're like going out and starting fights. I don't think that that's a normal thing for most people. No, I don't think so.
I just disagree then. I think that does come up, and I think when it comes up you should be ready not only to protect a woman but also your children, right? I mean, that's an element here as well. Because children are vulnerable, they can't defend themselves, and being able to have that sort of protection mindset and the physical capability of doing so, that to me seems like a perfectly fine principle to follow and something that is good to encourage in men. And when we don't, we get problems, right?
If
every couple that was attacked, I'm sure didn't think they were going to be attacked. Like, you're not planning for what is most likely to occur. You're planning for the exception to the rule, that one bad night.
You're not planning your entire life's future relationship and your family and everything around a potential exception.
It's one part. It's
the
one
men
part.
that you know. The men that I know, like I know an atheist anarchist who is fully prepared to physically protect his family and also do that with weapons.
That's fine, but I'm just saying that, like,
be your community.
You said you lived in the Midwest. I lived in Omaha, Nebraska, and Council Bluffs for my entire life. I don't know where all these people that are getting. Maybe there's really, really rough neighborhoods where some of you guys are just like walking. Chicago, by and large, is a peaceful place to be. There are some parts that are dangerous. Same thing with Detroit. I spent a lot of time in Chicago, a lot of time in Detroit. Most of the city is fine, right? There are parts that are sketchy. Same thing with LA. Like, most of the city's fine. There might be some spooky homeless people in some areas. But it's not like Chicago's like, I got to call a friend because we only travel in groups of 7 or more when we walk to work or something, right? I don't think it's that crazy. But maybe that's just my perspective, right?
The average modern person has a lot of tools at their disposal that they can use to minimize risk of danger in their life. And so having this burly security guard follow you around and making that like your primary objective in finding a partner just is obviously... it's irrelevant.
It doesn't have to be primary. It could be one element, right?
It could be one element.
Could be one element.
I do agree. I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that a dude that's shredded that could kick like 3 people's ass, that's going to be an attractive guy physically, and there's going to be like, I don't disagree with that. But whenever I push on like what are the masculine traits men need to work on, one, we're talking about a guy that's like a top 1%er there that can like take on like multiple adversaries. So it's not realistic for most men to aspire to. And 2, it's like the first thing that everybody gives. And when I hear this, I'm like, holy fuck, are we like in Mosul right now? Is there like fucking ISIS around the corner where you're planning your relationship and shit? Where 99% of the time, oh fuck, there's a really good rule for buying shit in your life. And it's like the 10-99 rule or something. Like, I don't remember what it's called, but it's like you spend like 99% of your money on the things that you spend like 99% of your time on, right? So you get a good bed, a good chair, whatever. whatever. The idea that we're planning our relationships around like these exceptional one-off circumstances, like how do you feel about your husband? Like he's a really shitty communicator, he's really abusive to me and everything, but man, if we ever get into a fight, he's gonna somebody up. Like I've never heard anybody say that my entire life before.
Well, because it's a caricature. That's why you haven't heard it. It doesn't make any sense. Just because a man is dangerous doesn't mean that he's inherently malicious. It's just that he's capable of ending somebody's life who's trying to harm his, not just his woman, but his children. I wrote an entire article about this, and there's women that agreed that these traits are attractive as well. I think that women who want masculine men, I think some women are not able to compete for a masculine man or are not feminine enough for him. You know what I mean? Because it requires a dynamic in the household. How is he supposed to lead how is he supposed to lead if you're constantly dominating him? So for those women, for masculine women or women who are just just not in touch with the dating market, yeah, they might end up with some feminine men that they're going to complain about until the end of time, and that's okay. That's not typically what I advocate for, but it's going to happen to majority of folks. Like not everybody's going to get someone that they're attracted to in the long term.
What do you think the most masculine men are doing in society? The most masculine men in society are making single moms and they're in jail.
Okay, you're talking about
that's
the
their
very
new false
extremes.
masculinity.
No, that's the traditional honor culture, man. That's as traditional as it gets. Violence on the street.
Single motherhood is traditional?
It is the most traditional form of hyper-masculinity. Is f***ing women without a care in the world and then getting into violent altercations and ending up in jail. Of course. These are the most masculine men.
Triad.
Sure, but I'm saying that is like the most hyper-masculine, like...
So...
When all you're giving me is like protection and ability to fight, yeah, that's of course what most people are thinking of, right?
So I also am questioning. Hold on, I do have a question for Ali as well. You're advocating for, increased femininity in these relationships. You're anti-feminism, and yet it feels to kind of fly in the face of that belief that you did spend time in the military. How does that? Because that is a very masculine direction to go in. How is that? How do you square those two ideas?
So you're right. It was a masculine thing to do, is a masculine thing to do, did masculinize me, and I had to kind of deprogram a lot of these things. But we're also dealing with propaganda. When the United States Army told me that I was strong enough, as strong as a man, and that I could carry a man 6 foot with weapons and armor on his body off of the battlefield, I believed them. This is inherently false. I am 5'4". I was 127 pounds when I joined. I thought that I was signing up for a job that I could do. That turned out to be a lie, and I'm permanently disabled in some ways. I'm functional, but it did change my body for the rest of my life, and I'm not the only woman. There's a lot of women that have the same injuries that I do. I have no problem saying this publicly. I have labral tears in my hips. That's from my time in service. I'm grateful that I did it. It got me financial stability early in my 20s for the rest of my life, but it came at a huge cost. And that was just propaganda. Like, I truly thought that I was able to do my job.
So today, do you think women have a place in the military or no?
Yeah. But they changed. So here's the thing. They tried to do that, right? They tried to kind of equalize it based on sex, because that's an objective reality that we can't deny. They did the Army combat fitness test, but women were failing it. Like, not that you can fail it, but they just weren't qualifying very well for the positions that they wanted. So they even had to adjust that. Even when I was in, there were physical differences for the APFT, the Army physical fitness test. So that were, they had things that were different between men and women there as well. Can you repeat your question one last time?
If you believe that women have a place in the military today, after your experience and everything.
Right. Yeah.
Is that not a feminist ideal, though, or a feminist perspective?
Right. So I think that we should just do the jobs that we're physically qualified for, period. But like, they cannot have these false standards where they're just sending people through these schools, because that's what happened to me. And that's what happened to other women that were in my class to be a combat medic specialist. They just gave them the checks. That's not okay. You have to be able to physically perform the task. And there's a minority of women who can, but most women can't. That's not to say that they can't be human resources. I think that that's absolutely fine to be a desk jockey, and you're still serving your nation. We used to have a women's Army Corps, but we did the co-ed thing, and the co-ed thing has other consequences too, like sexual harassment. And also, not to say that the military is like e-pari, but that's YouTube speak for the R word. But when these things do happen, it's not handled well internally. So that there's consequences from this co-ed nature. But I don't think that women can't serve. I just think they need to be serving differently in different jobs they're physically qualified for.
And that highlights kind of the aim here, which is the goal of equity. They are lowering the standards for women because the reality is the women that can make it are the exceptions. And we just have to approach society with that understanding, right? In the same way that in relationships, right? And the ability to be a protector and physical size those things, like, yeah, are there women that can protect themselves? You probably could, right? But those are exceptions. And also there's a perception of danger as well. So I can't tell you how many women I know who don't feel comfortable walking alone at night, right? But they feel perfectly fine when I'm walking with them. That in of itself is like a limiting factor when they're concerned about the risk and the harm that can come to them. But that being able to be a protector alleviates that perception and really provides a level of freedom of, yeah, like I can walk being comfortable now. I think that's an important part of this.
I'm so curious where you guys are from, because I've known so many women in so many different areas. I remember one of the first times I was in fucking Seattle hanging out with a girl, I got fucking petrified because some crazy fucking 300-pound homeless dude behind us started fucking screaming. And I was like, is this normal? And she was like, oh yeah, there's a lot of homeless people that are just screaming. Like, Jesus fucking Christ. I know so many women in so many cities like this that have no problem walking like to and from work, that like obviously don't go to sketchy sections, but some of them ride the bus, some of them ride the train, some of them just don't give a fuck. Where are these like ultra violent areas in the US where women are like, I can't even go outside, I'm worried that I'm gonna get like abused or raped or whatever? Like, I feel like this is only happening in the context of like going to sketchy parties or bars where you're getting hit on. If you like go literally like to a bar or something alone as a woman, it can get spooky. But I feel like most women are like not dumb enough to do that. But
so there's like the practical application, and then there's the romantic application. Women trend higher in neuroses like anxiety and depression in comparison to men. Right, we might not say these things out loud, but I mean, y'all, you have a wife, okay? Don't front, okay? So it's not just about that fact that my man is physically capable, and that's a big deal if I'm going to choose a man and I'm going to have his children. But it's also that I can breathe. I don't have to have that high level of anxiety and be on alert because my husband is on alert for me, in a sense. Like, I'll try to be practical, but that's the other thing that it's for. You know, it's not like you're gonna go outside and always get your ass whooped. Like, the statistics don't support that. I think we know that.
Sure, but I'm curious, and there's got to be some other thing, because my guess is there's probably the majority of men, like 98%, are stronger than the majority of women, but that's not enough to get a woman to date you, right? And then even in the case where you could select for, and again, if you guys want to give more masculine traits, I'm just working on what's been given so far, even in a case where you could select for the most masculine man, you could find guys that are way more shredded or way more physically capable in their 20s or early 30s that are capable of protecting you. But I think, and I don't know this, but I think you selected your husband for traits that were more important than just this, like, being a protector part. I bet there's other reasons why you're married to him, and it's not just because you found like the first 49-year-old guy that could protect you. Like, the fact that he's so old probably means he's developed so many other traits that I bet you're attracted to as well, would be my guess.
Well, let's dig into that real quick. Let's dig into that, right? Like, so we mentioned like protection, assertiveness, to penetrate the world, as we say. What are some other masculine traits, maybe more on the mental side? Like, some things I hear are stoicism, reliability. Yeah, that's what I can think of off my head. What do you guys got?
Yeah, I want to talk about stoicism, but somebody else go first.
Yeah, I think stoicism is good. I also think being able to provide is good. I think a lot of this kind of comes back to, ultimately the common root here is being able to control a bad situation, or being able to make a good situation even better. So, like, not only in the situation of protecting somebody, but also, being able to provide for somebody who maybe has to take off work to go give birth, and staying home and breastfeeding their child. Like, being able to be in the position to take care of that person is another masculine trait that I think is beneficial for that very reason. Because if you're not able to do that, well, now the child is at a disadvantage.
Again, I think we got to get it, because you're saying jobs again. It's got to be something more than jobs, because women can work. It has to be something more than that. Yeah.
You're right. No, like, you're right. Like, you have to be a man if you're going to have a feminine woman in your life who's comfortable with, like, building a legacy and a life with you. Like, you keep asking, like, what's missing? Like, manhood is what's missing. But,
but I'm trying to figure out what that is. Even when you say, like, stoicism,
okay.
like,
well,
being
stoicism, I got you, right?
Okay, get me, yeah.
Every woman wants to be like, oh, we're egalitarian. We can handle the hard stuff. Right. When I see a man crying, I am immediately instilled with fear, because ish has hit the fan. You can argue an evolutionary perspective on that, but I'll give you a better example. You're a woman on a flight. There's turbulence, but you don't really care. The stewardesses are moving through, the men are quiet. Now there's turbulence and the men start screaming. Would you not just, like, urinate on yourself right then and there? Like, as a society, I think we rely on men for emotional stability. I think that we really do. And I've had men come out and talk about this as well. And a lot of these things are going to be anecdotal, but there's some studies we could talk about another time. But I've had men come out and say that they had to be strong for a period of time when there's a death and things like that. There's going to be moments in time where a woman is is called to be stoic. And I would argue as well, Marcus Aurelius was taught stoicism by his wife. So it can work for both genders, but it is an attractive thing in a man just because of, on average, and that's a fact, women trade higher in neuroses. We look to you guys to be the calm to the storm. And again, with these feminine men that are out here, you know, we've talked about DJ Ack. But anyway, like these guys that just go off hyper emotional, yeah, like that's not masculine, I wouldn't say.
Have they failed as men too?
I would agree with what you're saying there.
Yeah.
But I also, I guess,
context, right?
I push back a little bit on like, because when we talk about like hyper emotionality as the opposite of stoicism, I don't think anybody likes hyper emotional people. Like, if, I don't like even hyper emotional women are probably not good. I agree with to some extent with what I don't like calling this stoicism. I think like having good emotional stability and being able to remain calm and being able to remain in control in complicated or confusing situations, I would agree that that's an important trait for a person to have. It shows a level of like emotional maturity to be able to do that. I don't know if men are the ones that are traditionally excelling in that, given how many of them are prone to violent crime.
Mm-hmm. Like, would it help if you just separated masculinity and femininity, like, from the person and made it more spiritual? Because these concepts exist across all cultures, all religions, in all time. And I know we like to think that we're these social constructivists, but there is something to be said that there's a wisdom there that these things have emerged in all these different parts of the world throughout human history, well, recorded human history. So you can argue it from a spiritual context. It doesn't need to be just distilled down to the sexes. It's just that if you're going to have polarity in a relationship, hopefully long term, because that's what I kind of hope for, if you're going to have polarity, like you might want to be more on the masculine side of things as a man, and as a woman, you might want to be more on the feminine side of things. And just to have that yin and that yang. That
I agree. Yeah, I agree that things have emerged through all of human history in these ways that these gender roles are. I'm not going to disagree with that. That's obviously true. But I think there are two things that uniquely challenge that today, and that's birth control and education, such work. I think that these things have fundamentally altered a woman's relationship with sex and fundamentally altered her engagement with the world. And now we're seeing that maybe some of those old roles that emerged aren't really as intrinsic to our sex as we thought they were. Maybe they were intrinsic to our roles in society that kind of followed our sex. But now that women have the ability to fuck without consequence and work a job, it might be that we have to engage with these concepts in a slightly different manner. We can't just assume that all women want to be like submissive and subservient. That might have just been secondary to them not having jobs.
Other than
you think it's somewhat intrinsic? Like you said it's not super intrinsic or not as intrinsic as we thought. But I mean, do you think that biological realities to some extent are always going to inform some level of gender roles, and we just recognizing that could be a good thing?
I think in a perfect world where everybody's treated equally as much as possible, you'd still probably see some differences between men and women. I just think there's nowhere near the exaggeration that they exist today or that people think they exist. But yeah, there's probably going to be some differences for sure. If for no other reason, there's going to be differences in terms of like average strength and like our aptitude.
Right, but that average strength, for example, right? Like it almost seems to me that we're kind of pushing it beyond what the equilibrium is, right? And then like Allie was talking about in the military, they're literally lowering the standards for women to get more women in the military when that's not where the equilibrium truly is.
Yeah, that's
in the
stupid.
name of feminism.
I think everybody in here agrees that the changing of those standards for how they would grade you on your Army fitness test, the Army personal fitness test, the changing of those standards is fucking stupid. You either can climb into a plane with a rucksack on or not, or a helicopter. Like you either can or you can't. It doesn't matter if you're a man or woman. Like the grading should be objective for that, right?
Right, and that's one example of like society pushing. I mean, I can think of it as we keep talking, but that was the one that came to mind because of what Allie talked about, right? Like this idea of feminism is pushing beyond what the equilibrium is. And in fact, the equilibrium might be that the differences that do exist and should be expressed through gender roles might be greater in certain circumstances than they currently are.
What I mean by other, just to kind of, when I ask for other examples, like other examples of how femininity or feminism has changed, like the standards that we use and apply, that we have pushed the bar away from the equilibrium that Lactoid here is talking about in the name of equity or equality. Can you give me some more examples other than the military? Anything else?
Yeah, so I mean, but this is gonna be, we're gonna have to take a little bit of a walk for this one. But leaving women vulnerable to where they are gonna be more at risk of elder abuse because they bought into like this feminist boss babe, independent, single and childless narrative.
If I'm a feminist boss babe, wouldn't I have enough money to hire for end of life care and pay for like a nurse to come in and take care of me because I've been working for decades and investing in my retirement?
Yeah, and that's awesome, and what I recommend to childless women who want to be single and all these other things. And that sounds great until you have Alzheimer's or dementia, and you're going to need people that love you, that you enrich their lives, and they're going to be looking out for you to make sure that you're not being abused. You want your kids or your husband or your nieces and nephews, doesn't matter which one, you just need to invest that time. You want them to be up the behind of whatever nursing home you end up in. We take our cognition
absolutely.
for
It's
granted
important
as
to have
women.
family members looking after older people, but it doesn't always necessarily have to be the children. Like there are definitely other options available too.
Yeah, like nieces and nephews. On my husband's side of the family, they have a matriarch. She's an aunt, but you would never guess that she wasn't a grandmother. I thought that she was, but she had just invested so much time in her nieces and nephews. They all take very good care of her. But like what I'm saying when it comes to like how that can be a drawback for feminism, because we're talking about liberating women, that's putting women at risk for abuse, right? And it's like you have a fertile window that takes a sharp hit at 35. And if we're going to be living right now, we're living to 71.1. I anticipate that'll increase. And I think that we'll, if I had to choose, I think we'll probably be living to 90. So if you as a woman choose to be single and or childless, the repercussions of that are going to be 55 years of the rest of your life to 90.
I think something real quick, because I think this is actually a counterintuitive thing. I think if you want to increase your chances of being safe as a woman, I think that you have to remain single, because I think that the highest likelihood that a woman ever encounters violence in her lifetime is interpersonal violence in a domestic abuse situation. That's so the best thing you can do is keep a man out of your house. Like the chance of a guy breaking into your house and like violent robbery or whatever, or burglary or stuff like that is pretty low, but I'm pretty sure a decent number, I'd have to Google it, but I thought it was like 30 to 40% of women have experienced like some form of like intimate partner violence in the household. And it's
So
like,
you're talking about DV, but I'm talking about how like, how other ways that feminism can be harmful. I'm saying that there's probably going to be a wave of women that are single and or childless that are at risk for being abused in nursing homes that we haven't seen before. Women are also right now, if you neglect the trans stats, in comparison to men, they're the largest growing demographic of homeless individuals. And I get what you're saying. Like, I get what you're saying. I'm sorry, I have pregnancy brain right now. I'm trying to remember your name.
Steven?
Genevieve. Okay.
Oh,
Yeah. Genevieve,
sorry,
yeah.
geez.
So I get what you're saying about like, make the money. Okay. But for some reason, there are, I don't know how much money you're making or anything like that, but women making enough money to retire, that's the minority of women. That's also the minority of people. You know what I mean? So like as much as women should be doing this thing, if you're going to be single and childless, you need to put your big girl panties on and you need to go and you need to make that bread. But they're not going to. Like that's the problem.
Well, I think that's a problem for men as well. I think a lot of people are struggling to have enough of a retirement fund to live comfortably in their old age. And I think that kind of brings us back full circle to something that was brought up in the beginning of the conversation by Stephen, that we have a lot of issues that are affecting both men and women, and this like hyperfixation on making it a men versus women kind of a conversation all the time.
Yeah, old
isn't
person
really doing us any favors.
End of life care, to make that a gendered issue would be crazy to me, because if anything, I would expect technically women are always probably going to suffer end of life care, even in a perfect world, because women tend to outlive men anyway, right?
Right.
Women tend to outlive men, and they tend to marry up in age like 4 to 5 years too. So you're like always setting yourself up to be,
Well,
I guess there's also a stereotype. There's a stereotype that these single childless women also are just like living in these cliques of other single childless women. So in that regard, they'd be much better off than like a single friendless man, because they'd at least have other like found family that they would be able to gain support from too. They're less lonely.
I want to
right.
Go ahead.
So, but I want like back to elder abuse. Like this is I mean, I have the information pulled up on another slide, but it's common consensus. I say even maybe for the CNC that women are more at risk of elder abuse than males. And I'm not saying that maybe the men aren't being reported or maybe they're not living as long, but women dominate the workforce when it comes to CNAs, and they are low educated, low paid women. I have family members that have been CNAs. I went to college with women who are CNAs. It's not the highest professional status job out there, right? So that's already an issue. It's low education and then low compensation. Aside from that, when they have to choose, like let's say that you just happen to be this sociopathic, malicious CNA, are you going to try to beat down a man or a woman? You're probably going to choose a woman. They're smaller because
An old person? They're both equally beatable, downable.
I'm actually so curious. If you were to do a fight between 70-year-old men and women,
I can get there if you let me get there, right? No, like older men being strong is true. You can talk to CNAs. They have had like fists thrown at them by not mentally cognizant men, and they land hard. Eventually, yeah, they do get weak, but in comparison to women, there are still sex differences in old age, like that old man strength that we joke about. Like it's actually true and real. Y'all probably got neighbors out there that are like trimming their yard that are 90 years old, but like that's not the point. Women are also at risk more so for osteoporosis, Alzheimer's, and dementia. That's what makes them more vulnerable. Aside from the sex differences, those three things, that's going to leave them to be victimized, in my opinion, by low educated, low compensated other women. That's the danger if you don't set up your life accordingly. If you do, amazing, awesome. Do I think that feminism promotes that? Like I don't think women get practical advice from feminists.
Okay, I think this is a good segue to ask about a tweet you recently made, if you don't mind, Allie. Okay. So recently, because you talked about the importance of having children and things like that, I've seen you discuss that on your channel. But recently you tweeted something that I have questions on. And I'm going to read it verbatim here. Surrogacy is evil. Rich women and men rent a poor woman's womb and deprive a baby of the only mother it knew. Do you care to elaborate on what you mean by that exactly?
Yo, I meant what I wrote. What you mean?
Damn.
I meant what I wrote.
I was excited for this turn of conversation here. If we can make it a bit personal, just for a moment. Yes. I don't have children currently, but I do want biological children at some point. I'm also an endocrine cancer survivor, and that complicates my medical history so that I'm not able to carry a pregnancy to full term. What would you suggest someone in my situation do who wants biological children but doesn't want to be evil according to your standard here?
Don't pull any punches. Go hard. Make her cry.
Like, infertility is a common human issue. Like it is what it is. Like you can't. This is what we want to plan for everything. We want to make sure that we can get everything that we want. Sometimes you don't always get what you want. If you want biological children, there's ways that you can go about it, but then we have to go into the ethics of IVF. Like I still think and maintain that surrogacy is evil. There are things that you can't plan for. You cannot plan for endocrine cancer that you survived, right? So it just is that you're not going to be able to biologically carry children. So how can we live and operate aside from that? We can go for adoption. That's one thing we can do. I think that, if America
adoption is great, and that's definitely something that I do want to consider as well. But I can't deny that I want at least one biological child or more. And then I do plan on fostering and all of that as well. But are you saying, like, in your worldview, I'm just kind of shit out of luck on the, like, I got dealt a bad hand, sorry.
She's always going to be evil.
You had to go through treatment, but you're either evil or you don't get to have kids that are yours biologically.
Yeah, and that doesn't
Would it also be evil if one of my sisters were my surrogate?
That I don't think so. I think the problem is like the changing of money in hands for labor. Like that's odd.
I would pay them if my sister was my surrogate. I would still pay her.
Wait, just real quick. Then why are you okay with adoption? If that's your problem, why are you okay with adoption? You know that money changes hands in that situation too.
The kid's already born though, right? It's a fundamental. You're not renting womb space.
Yeah, and this is usually like upper class women that are renting poorer women's wombs. Like this is modern day slavery that somehow is allowed and continues the commodification of the female body. It doesn't mean that I don't have like empathy for women who are infertile, but why do we have to be like, oh well, you can't have kids, so let's just rent somebody else to have kids for you? Like sometimes you just take L's in life. I had a miscarriage. There wasn't anything that I could do about that. That is life, and that's okay.
We have the medical abilities to intervene in things. I mean, you could use the same argument that I shouldn't have pursued any oncology treatment in that case. Like it's that's ridiculous
life. It's
to
cancer.
assume that just because I'm privileged and I have access to medical things that other people don't have access to, that I shouldn't take advantage of them or I shouldn't pursue them.
You just said it yourself.
I'm not denying that I'm privileged. There is absolutely a privilege there. 100%.
Yeah, it's an incredible privilege. And I mean, it's absolutely insane. And I suppose, I don't know if this was an option to anyone who has endocrine cancer, but to have like eggs harvested, beforehand, before you get chemo treatment. Like, I don't know what that looks like, but we're just continuing to cheapen the sanctity of life.
Wait, hold on. How does it cheapen? How does it cheapen the sanctity of life? If somebody has like IVF,
are you kidding me? Like, let me.
If I had my
for
eggs
you.
frozen, I would still need a gestational carrier to carry the pregnancy. The issue isn't my eggs; it's the actual being able to carry full term.
Yeah,
and also I want to hear. I want to hear the sanctity of full life.
You know?
How is that?
The sanctity of life, like it's a really cheap thing that we have women who, it's not simply because they had like a genetic or a fertility issue or an environmental problem. There are women who simply encountered senescence, old age as a human, and because they didn't plan accordingly, they simply are going to pay another woman to carry a life. That is the only mother that baby knows, and we're just going to completely rip it from them. And that's for the women that are getting surrogacy. That's not even to talk about the gay male couples that are doing surrogates, or I mean same-sex female couples too that are doing surrogates. Like, it depends on what you believe, and I believe that children have a fundamental right to a mother and a father.
Okay, wait, hold on, wait. That second part is irrelevant, okay? Hold on, because you can have a mother and a father that are adopted too, right? I just don't understand how, if somebody chooses to do the surrogacy thing, I don't see where the cheapening of life comes from, because they've given up essentially the child they've had like to a prearranged adoption. Does that, like, whose life is being cheapened there?
The child and the woman. That takes an emotional toll. Are you like, where are the rich women that are out here being surrogates?
They're not doing it. Where are the rich women that are out there working McDonald's? That takes an emotional toll too, right? Obviously, if you're being compensated for something like that, I never said it was the same thing. But of course, there's going to be some emotional toll. But that's what you're being compensated for, is the emotional toll, right?
Oh, I mean, okay, yeah, we're just gonna pay women for the emotional toll of having a child ripped from their arms.
We pay for emotional labor all the time.
Yeah, emotional labor is literally like, damn, when you look at like nursing and like, or veterinarian work, that's some of the most arduous and emotionally exhausting work that happens in society. No, but you guys don't, and I mean, people are compensated for the emotional labor there, right? I guess we can say that like that form of compensation is maybe unethical or whatever, but I think that opens you up more broadly.
Unethical, it's immoral.
Yeah, but I mean, then more broadly, you're looking at a lot of different types of transactions that are probably unethical. Like when we talk about like CNAs working with people in old folks' homes, like that job is emotionally exhausting, and those people aren't compensated that well for it. Or working with older patients with dementia, or working with a ton of things that can be emotionally exhaustive. I don't know if we would ever run down that argument and go like, yeah, I think all forms of emotional exhaustion aren't ethical to be compensated for.
I think people love to have these conversations about like surrogacy and abortion, and it's like they haven't, reproduced themselves. I know Destiny is a father, but it's like you get to a point in life where you kind of realize
you're telling me I'm shit out of luck about reproducing.
What do you want me to, like, oh, hey God, hey, look, can you go back in time and hook up Genevieve? Like, you get the cards that you're dealt, like, and it sucks.
We don't get the cards. We reshuffle the deck all the time, right?
Okay, then reshuffle the deck. Go pay a poor woman and rent out her womb. Go, if you want to. Go do it. It's legal. It's unethical. It's immoral.
Why is it?
I don't condone it.
We're trying to figure out why it's unethical or immoral, right? Like you can say, like, God, my kidney,
to use her body, and she's putting her life on the line. Usually for women who didn't plan properly, because infertility, that's a different discussion. We're just like talking about the luxury of it, the constant commodification of the female body. Like nobody's out here trying to like rent. Like it's just.
How many people that pursue gestational carriers do you think are doing it just out of pure convenience and not out of any kind of like medical or infertility element?
Even I don't.
That's probably a pretty small group of people at that point, right? Like even Kim Kardashian had a medical reason to use surrogates.
It's still evil. Whether or not you're doing it for infertility or because of senescence, you are still renting out a younger, lower socioeconomic status woman's womb.
Is that
that's
lower
not always true? What, like my example of using a sister or a friend or something, I would still pay them. Where's the evilness in that?
What if she's wealthier?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, what if she's wealthier? Because you keep saying lower SES. Is that like integral to your argument?
I think that's probably what's happening here.
Yeah, but let's say it was just, let's say it was only the wealthiest
that are using the lower SES people.
I want to pay $1 million to have Hillary Clinton deliver my future child. Okay, would that be unethical?
I mean, that's just like I don't know if you guys like to work with those examples, but I don't typically work with those kinds of examples.
The problem is that
cool.
It'd be so weird that it'd be unethical.
Well, no. I think the issue is that you're saying something is fundamentally unethical or evil, but in your example, you're depriving multiple people of liberty. You're telling one woman she's not allowed to sell her services in that way, and you're telling another woman she's not allowed to purchase a service in that way. So you've got two consenting adults that want to engage in a transaction that should only be their business, and you want to interject and say, actually, that mutually consensual transaction, that's unethical. That's a pretty high bar that you're setting for whatever the unethicality is. So we need to have like some reason for why it's unethical. I think the ball is in your court to say, like, even though both these adults are consenting and they're of age, they're not minors, they're fully within their rights to do whatever they want, it's still unethical. The ball is in your court to say why.
It could, because it's like this constant cheapening of the sanctity of life. Okay, so we see this here because I think about the slippery slope. Okay, so like we can talk about like
no, hold on, wait. If you just said you wouldn't deal with our examples earlier, you can't appeal to slippery slope now. You need to say why this is.
These are things that have happened. These are things that have happened. This is a slippery slope that has occurred. Okay.
Okay.
So like we've cheapened the sanctity of life to where we're like, like we could just rent out another woman's womb. I'm sure it's been done in human history. Don't get me wrong. But like I think that it's getting really, really strange right now when we have women who are like past their fertile window. They're just like, well, I could just, I can do this, I can do that. There's all these fail safes for women. That's one cheapening of human life. Another cheapening of human life. Also, we're not considering the child, the freaking kid that's in the womb that knows the mom.
The kid doesn't. The kid doesn't know the difference. What do you mean?
Yes, they do. My baby in my womb can hear.
Your baby is not even forming memories yet. She does. She's like.
That's fine.
No, but I'm just saying that like kids that are there are a reason why kids can be adopted at early ages, and parents have to have the talk with like, listen, you're adopted. Because like, oh my god, I didn't know. Unless they have like fucking green eyes or some shit, right?
There's still problems that come from that. Even if you adopt a 6-month-old, there's issues from that. Okay, but aside from that, right? That's like a cheapening. Then we have abortion, right? Where we can just terminate. If you spend enough time talking to multiple women that are pro-choice, it just comes down to like, well, when I feel like is when I should be able to terminate. The consequence of abortion logic has trickled down to medical assistance in dying. We in the West just don't have an appreciation for the sanctity of life. And the conversation, like the surrogacy conversation plays into that. So we keep just trying to find ways to commodify and play God, and then we're gonna like sit here and whine about the consequences.
You have to,
of it after the fact.
You can't.
Humanity.
You're begging the question on so many of these things that like you say like because you keep saying things that don't mean anything. Like like playing God. When we give type 1 diabetics insulin, that's playing God.
You.
No. It means nothing to you either, right? Because if you go and have birth and you get an epidural, is that playing God? Or if you've got somebody that's getting insulin, is that playing God? Or we've got somebody on the panel that's had oncology treatments, has had chemotherapy or radiation. Is that playing God? Like we play God all the time in a ton of different ways, right? Your face doesn't look like that.
Drawing the line about
like your face. You've got makeup on your face. My hair is not naturally blue. Like we alter human experience and existence and medical outcomes and everything all the fucking time. There are a lot of babies that shouldn't live that do because of like neonatal treatments we have. Like we play God in all sorts of different ways. The onus is on you to say why it's wrong. You can't just say like it's wrong because it's playing God, because we play God in all sorts of different ways.
I don't think that any of the examples you gave can be compared to a human life that is its own human life with its own unique DNA sequence. I don't think these are the same thing.
And I think the medical example absolutely is, because if I didn't have medical intervention and play God with my treatments, then that's my life that wouldn't be here.
There's no other human that was involved in that, right? Like we're breaking down.
But if we're talking about the safety of life and we want to just let it be in God's hands, then we shouldn't ever intervene in these situations.
I'm talking about a human life with potential. You guys are talking about like unrelated medical interventions, and I'm explaining how like this logic has leaked out.
I'm also talking about a human life,
not like a separate. Like, where's the baby?
Well, can I ask then, Allie? So you have your husband. He passes out. He doesn't have a DNR or anything. You don't know. Just flow with me in this hypothetical, please. You have to make a medical decision for him in aftercare. You are making decisions, medical decisions, to affect another human life that might be deleterious. They might have bad consequences. Are you just not going to choose to save the person you love because maybe there's going to be some pain down the road? Like that's playing with another human life, is it not?
Yes, but I wouldn't.
So what's the difference?
Specifically talking about babies. Now, my husband's life.
What age is it okay to play with a human life?
I don't think we're being reasonable here. We're comparing somebody who's in an accident that was out of their control, right? We're comparing that to a new human life with potential. However, if my
they have control over that,
I am answering his question. I'm answering his question. So if the doctors tell me that my husband still has human potential, because they're going to tell me if there's like brain death or not. If they tell me that he still has human potential, then I'm going to make decisions to extend his life. But if they're looking at me and they're telling me that he's brain dead, he wouldn't want me to extend his life. Like, that's the difference. It's about potential, and we're nailing down human life and its potential and its value down to convenience. And we can see that in other ways. Like, why does the palliative care conversation even end up entering majority of the time when I talk about things like abortion or surrogacy? Like, it's just cheapening human life. Like, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, but Lactoid TV could chime in, because I feel like maybe we share similar things here.
This is a topic that it's kind of your opinion. I'm gonna let you go ahead and roll with it.
Wow, Wick.
I think that there are like things that are manipulative, or I feel like we can think of things that involve like using people and or can be manipulative in other ways. Like, I think sex work is a great example. I'm not super sold on the whole surrogacy thing, though. I'm sorry. As long as it's a child being born, I can't, like, as long as the child has a good home and is being cared for and has that initial mother son or daughter bonding at the beginning couple months, it seems like you're respecting the life at that point, right?
You're talking about, like, you would be okay with surrogacy because it's bonded with the mom initially or something like that?
Yeah, as long as the kid was because the issue here is like broken houses, right? If the kid is coming up in a terrible house, regardless of surrogacy or a natural birth or anything like this, I think this would be the problem. But if you have a child born to like a surrogate mother, and then basically given to like the mother right away, and the mother takes care of the kid, breastfeed the kid, builds a bond there throughout the first like 5-6 months or to a year or 3 years of their life, it would seem to me like the critical part of like motherhood is sort of accomplished. So
this is, I mean, no. Like, what the hell?
Destroyed. You
like,
sound pretty feminine right now, Lactoid. Haha, got him.
I don't even, here's the thing, like, you get the first 5 years of life to, permanently set this child up and give them a foundation. Whether you adopt children that are born, a couple months after, or, like 6 months or like several years down the road, they still have like trauma and attachment issues, and adoptive parents don't even find out until like sometimes several years down the road, if that. So like, there's still damage being done. My perspective is, why do we even need to do the surrogacy? And we don't need to inflict this pain on children. Like, that sounds like child abuse to me.
So, and this is where I'm totally open to being convinced. I've seen a lot of empirical evidence on why single parent households are bad. I haven't really seen any evidence that surrogacy has these same issues.
I think that
I'm not trying to go hard at you. I'm just saying.
I think the issue is that if you're talking on a spiritual level, I think that the issue is that there is like a fundamental role that a woman has in bringing a child into this world, and it starts at the moment of conception, and it doesn't end at delivery. It goes all the way to the death of, unfortunately, the child, or ideally the mother. Right? That there's this whole thing in parenting that's involved in creating and birthing and raising and having a child, and that when we try to put too many things in between that process, that we cheapen the overall integrity of the process by making it hyper convenient at different points. So like, in the same way that you might cheapen the process of raising a child by giving them an iPad all the time, you might cheapen the process of motherhood by offloading all of the labor onto somebody else that like economically would choose otherwise. I think it's like the argument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's not like it's an option for your average woman. You know what I mean? Like, these are typically wealthy women that are doing this thing in the first place. It is cheap, right? I mean, here's the thing. When we can do some celebrity examples. Priyanka Chopra, she's older, married to Nick Jonas, I think. She wanted surrogacy not because she was infertile or anything like that. She made it very well known that she's fertile. Their schedules simply did not match up with her ovulation window. That's cheap. If you don't have, like, if you are not even willing to go through what it takes to like labor and have a child, and you have the ability to, it seems really weird that you'd rent somebody out for that. You know what I mean? Like, adoption, obviously a very valid thing, but also like, we are still neglecting that there is a possibility that children in these circumstances are being abused. They're being,
I think at the end of the day,
from the arms of a mother.
We would just need like some kind of empirical evidence of that. Like, are children born to surrogacy having like these huge traumatic issues? Like, my guess is the outcomes for them are probably way better than the norm, because it's parents that are electing to have them via surrogacy who are wealthy and everything too. Like, these are probably the children of the best. It's kind of like how I think children tend to do better in gay households because you have to adopt, and it's the idea that you have to jump through so many hoops to go through the adoption process that just by default, like, those children are going to end up doing better, not because gay parents are better, but just because of the selection process involved.
In the same way, yeah, you have to want this child so badly that you're going through all of these other obstacles to bring them into the world. There's good chance that you're also going to be taking steps to make sure that they have all the resources they need to grow up in a happy and healthy way.
So
It's not the same.
Ahead,
like I've actually,
I have a question.
Yeah, no, it's not the same. Like I've actually been pregnant. Like they go through things and they go through fears too, but there's certain things that they're not going to experience. And again, like I still think adoption is valid. This is not to negate adoption. I'm specifically talking about surrogacy. They don't know what that is to bear that physical toll with that baby inside of them. That's a lot of psychological, emotional, well, that would be the same thing as psychological. It's a lot of emotional and physical expenditure and bonding that they're not having with that child. And how many women are we seeing? And it's not like it's the masses, but there have been enough women that are surrogates that come out on TikTok and talk about these awful experiences that mirror experiences when like the wealthy used to adopt, when things were like way crappier regulation wise, where they kind of let them know like, hey, you're staff. This is our baby. Like one TikTok that I just recently saw with a surrogate, they wanted the mother to wait for labor. And she said, no, I can't wait for labor. I have to induce because the baby is their life is going to be threatened. And the surrogate couple was upset with her. Or we see, there was another
These are
picture
examples.
that I
All
saw.
of us would be opposed to that, though, right? Obviously, every single person here would be opposed to a surrogate mother being forced to carry somebody in an unhealthy condition, right?
Right. But like we see these examples that I simply need not be. There's other examples where we see like two gay men, they're taking a picture in the labor bed with the newborn baby. Why are they in the labor bed in the first place? They didn't give birth in that bed. They had to like, you know, like there's a certain level of perversion that is here, and that's the cheapening of the sanctity of human life. There's larger consequences. I'm not thinking about it just like as an isolated incident. I'm thinking about like the future societal implications of it. And I think that's often what gets neglected, I want to say, by the left is unintended consequences. Because if we commodify here, what are we going to see in the future? Because surrogacy, the way that it's being conducted now, is relatively new. So, like, I don't, you know, it's going to take a while to have the data on it. But I would wager to bet that it's probably going to be a negative impact in humanity. I don't know if it's going to be overall, but we'll have to wait and see.
Can I ask, so you mentioned something earlier, and correct me if I misheard or I was wrong or whatever, but you seem to say that surrogacy cheapens womanhood or cheapens something like that, to that effect, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'd ask Lactoid as well to chime in, or the other two if you want. Like, what else has modern society done to cheapen, in your opinion, womanhood? Like, what other examples other than surrogacy can we think of? Like, we could go on surrogacy all night, I think, if we want, but I do want to kind of broaden the discussion a little bit. What do you think, Lactoid? I want you to put you back on Team Alley, maybe a little bit here. What do you think?
Ways in which society has cheapened women?
Yes, cheapened womanhood, specifically. Femininity, womanhood, things like that. You mentioned pornography earlier?
Yeah, there's a different argument for that. I do think that perhaps, maybe not, I won't go down like the surrogacy route, but perhaps these sort of, to some extent, the sort of
I'm asking you,
cultural discouragement of motherhood as opposed to like career success. I think that that does somewhat cheapen the unique experience of women. I think pornography is manipulative as well as sex work, but for other reasons. I actually think it's more manipulative
of
against
men.
men. But yeah,
I knew
yeah,
it.
like drug dealers, for example. But that's a whole different conversation we can have.
Fair enough. Okay. Would you agree with that, Madam Genevieve, that society is pushing careers on women is cheapening your womanhood? Do you think, first of all, do you think that's happening? And second of all, do you think it's actually cheapening your, your femininity? What do you think?
I definitely don't think so. I think that, I guess, there's a lot of appeal in having a job and having a career and making your own income. So does that mean that it's being pushed on us? I don't know. It's pretty appealing to have your own bank account and to be able to buy stuff when you want to and know that you're not counting on someone else to keep a roof over your head. I think that's ultimately why most women have decided to pursue careers. I don't think it cheapens their womanhood at all. I think if anything, it gives them more security and resources to then explore like their true passions and things that they actually are interested in.
Me?
Anyone who wants to respond can.
Like, do jobs cheapen womanhood? No, jobs don't cheapen womanhood, right? Like, I think the thing is you know, you were saying earlier that it feels good to have your own money or something like that. There's some women that are completely okay with depending on good men. That's like a perspective to have. And I think we often have this boogeyman when it comes to women, you know, that if they get married and financially depend on a man, that they're going to be out there on their behinds. We've got tons of charities. That's one aspect. And the other thing, too, is if you are a stay-at-home wife and mom and or mom, you stand to benefit way more in divorce court than if you were employed. But as for, like, you know, a job, a profession making a woman masculine, that's not true. Like a Proverbs 31 woman, if you want to get biblical about it, she worked, she just kept the family as a priority. And men should be keeping the family as the priority as well. Like, that's not healthy for anybody. Aside from that, I think American women just want to look for all kinds of different excuses about why they can't be, you know, functional in a relationship. Like, oh, I can't be feminine for you because I have this job. Like, that doesn't make any sense. You know, there's lots of women that work and still treat their men like men.
I guess to elaborate a little bit more what I said, I'm not necessarily talking about like jobs in general. I had brought up in a discussion yesterday with somebody, I brought up all the stats that show that, you know, especially after following birth, you know, being home with the child and you know, breastfeeding is recommended by the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics consistently for both the, you know, physical and emotional well-being of the child. And I brought up how that is a reason, right? That could be a reason why motherhood is something that you know, should be done, I guess. And the very first response I got was, well, that's going to increase the wage gap, right? That's going to mean that women are taking breaks from their career and not making as much money. The fact that that was the response, I think, is sort of what I'm pointing to where the value that is there is sort of kind of being put aside for some kind of greater feminist narrative, or like this sort of idea of, well, we have to like get the wage gap all the way 100%, and we're willing to sacrifice what's best for our children to do so. I think that does cheapen motherhood to some extent, personally.
Where we get off thinking that we you know, we need it all, we gotta have it all, the world has to give us it all. We've already been relieved of the miracle of the burden of childbirth. Okay, so we have like birth control, we have economic autonomy. It's like nonsense to me. How much more do women want, right? And the alternative perspective too that gets forgotten, because women just aren't having kids. Okay, 50.1% of women in the UK are childless by age 30. That's unprecedented. Childbearing ends at some point, right? You will have a second half of life, and you're probably going to want to work, unless you're just going to be shuffling your kids around, taking them to different like events, sporting events, what have you. A lot of women end up, you know, working either from home or out there in the regular workplace after they raise children. But you know, I think that we lack that perspective because we're just not really doing it a whole lot. And also, women who decide to take a break from the job market and have children, they are not often out here streaming. Like, there's a reason why there's not a whole lot of conservative moms online. It's because they have stuff to do. Same thing with conservative fathers as well.
Conservative moms are definitely online. They're just all on Facebook sharing horrible memes with each other, to be fair.
Okay, well, I'm not trying to be mean. Like, maybe the decent ones. You know what I mean? Like, all the moms that I respect in real life and socialize with who raise their own kids, they're not online to this capacity or this degree.
Do you not respect streamers? That's actually the most base thing you've said. Okay, fair enough.
Lactoid, I
got Wi-Fi. That's all it is, you know.
Lactoid, I'm curious what your thoughts are on guaranteed paid parental leave. You're obviously in support of parents being able to spend time with a newborn. Do you think that should be something that's guaranteed?
This is a situation in which I have kind of two principles that collide, where in a perfect world, yes, like I would want that, and I would want there to be cultural sort of structures and social structures that encourage people to do that and support people doing that. But that sort of conflicts with like other opinions I have as it comes to you know, government spending, taxation.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I would be opposed to those policies, but I agree that,
despite the fact that you stated earlier that you are in support of all of the studies and you agree with the fact that it's best for everyone involved.
Yeah, no, it is, right? And so the question is, I mean, if we want to get like really libertarian with it, like how much money can we steal to do this good thing? I would kind of step away from that. I don't want to make it a libertarian, like, tax theft meme discussion. But I mean, that's the reason why. It's the only reason why I'd be opposed to it.
You want women to fulfill the role of womanhood, but you don't want to create a society that allows them to comfortably do that.
Well, no, I don't want to use coercion to make it so. I would rather it be that we have a culture thus that men wouldn't just leave, right? And I think this is like, when we're talking before, when it was brought up,
regardless of whether or not the man leaves, a lot of women don't have guaranteed paid leave after they give birth. Like, they're at risk of losing their job, whether or not the father is in the picture.
Sure. And so we should recognize, though, that, like, if that doesn't happen, that's a good thing. But there's always a trade-off. How much are we willing to do to force a good thing to happen? There's certain things I'm not willing to do if the offset is not sufficient enough. And I'm not sure it is.
I want to ask, there's another tweet, Allie. I'm sorry to pick on you a little bit.
No, it's okay.
There's another tweet you made about how sexual liberation has been a horrible failure. I don't have that tweet up right now, but
yeah,
that's the gist of it, right?
Oh yeah, I can't imagine, because if you're a forward thinker, right, not everybody's gonna have, not everybody just has that personality type. I've always been a forward projector, so like, that's what I'm saying. I constantly talk about, like, the slippery slope of the things that happened. So I'm just trying to think, if you're a logical thinker who can project, and the sexual liberation movement comes on the scene, and you're like, women can sleep with whoever they want, whenever they want, there's no consequence of pregnancy, they're probably not going to vet the men as much as they would if they had more skin in the game. And it's possible that a small pool of men who lack morals might take advantage of this opportunity. Like, you might have been thinking in your head, this sounds like a horrible idea, right? So I think in my mind, it probably only sounded like a good idea to the ignorant, degenerates, and hopefuls. It's the only way that sounded like a good idea.
I don't even know if this idea of a small pool of men, this weird hypergamy thing, I don't know if that even exists, actually. I've taken that at face value from red pillars for a long time. I don't think there's ever been any data or study to support that ever. I think people draw really weird predictions off of like Tinder, where it's like 5-to-1 men to women, which is a bad environment to compare anyway. But my guess is going to be that the more degenerate society you're talking about, probably the easier it is for the average dude to get laid, because there's not as much consequence there for a woman having sex with a person.
Yeah, I think men want us to be sexually liberated as women, but you're talking about, like, the small pool of men. So I'm just talking, like, if I look at hypergamy, I don't look at it just based off of, swiping on apps or anything like that. I think about, is it attractive, yes or no question, if a man is in the top of his field for a competence hierarchy. Because you can have a competence hierarchy in multiple fronts these days, because we're past the Industrial Revolution. So I think, just like, if you set yourself apart as a man in a group of men, then yeah, women might have a proclivity to want to be more romantic with you or to select you. So that's like my understanding of hypergamy. I know that these guys pontificate a lot about dating stats, but that also only holds true to people that use dating apps in the first place. So yeah.
Sure, but I'm just saying, if there was a huge tie-in to there being, like, a big consequence for sex for a woman, if you're, or I guess, wait, I don't even know what you disagree with then. Because it sounded like you were saying for the average guy, this might be a worse sexual environment, but I don't think that's the case. It's probably a better sexual environment if you're just looking to get laid.
I mean, I think there's hope for sexless men more so now. Like, I don't think men lose with sexual liberation is kind of my thing,
okay,
right? So because a lot of guys in my chat, I can get there, but a lot of guys in my chat, and it's just cheapening womanhood again, and sexuality again, spirituality. Like, what's the point of being a person if you can buy everything about me? But, like, even men in my chat, sometimes the incels, they'll come out and they'll say, well, I didn't benefit from the sexual liberation movement because, like, women don't want me. That's not true. Like, can you or can you not get porn on your phone at a moment's notice? Like, you have benefited from sexual liberation. Now, it's like, it can be a hindrance for the majority of men out there, but they benefited to some kind of degree. So I just don't view that to be a dub for women. I view that to be, like, a huge L. Louise Perry, she's a feminist herself, and she's come out and said that this stuff is trash. Because, like, the men that are worth mating with no longer want to commit to us. And so, like, we're accepting these situationships as women because we'd rather have the guy than be without him. And it's nonsense. We're not even, like, good negotiators either, because a lot of women probably could negotiate, like, a more commitment or a marriage out of these guys, but they're just unlikely to do so. I just don't think sexual liberation benefited women. That's just my opinion.
I would agree, but I don't think it particularly benefited men either. I think pornography is like a pretty massive detriment on men. I do agree, like, it cheapens sexuality, I think, generally speaking. It sort of put the focus on people to sort of have kind of cheap, fleeting experiences, as opposed to trying to achieve some kind of, for lack of a better word, glorious end goal of something more important than just chasing a high, which essentially that's what casual sex is.
So what about the rest of you? You think pornography? Let's focus on that for a little bit. And sexual liberation in general? Do you think it's made the world a better place for you, Madam Genevieve, now that you're sexually liberated, or do you think you've taken an L here?
For me, it's a major win, obviously. For me individually, and for a lot of women that I know, the ability to choose who I have sex with, when I have sex with them, that's just major. I'm obviously a big proponent of bodily autonomy, and that flies right in line with it. I don't see how that could possibly not be a win for women. It just seems so obvious to me. I'm lack at even explaining how the ability to have choice could possibly be a bad thing.
What, like, women could choose who they slept with before?
Well, a lot of times, if we're looking at like
Saudi Arabia,
men setting up marriages for their daughters is something that happened in the United States as well.
And how are women doing choosing their marriages now? How's that going?
Wait, are we implying that it's going worse for women now than it used to be, or by what metric?
I'm implying that there's just like a possibility that it was helpful when we had a father in the home that he vetted the men. I'm not saying it's the end all be all. Like, we just
wait, hold on. Wait, what is the how are you evaluating that it was better?
I mean, I don't have like objective metrics about it. It's just my opinion and position, and lots of women share. Well, on my side
but you have to, even if it's subjective, there's some subjective evaluation. Like, if I say I think it's better to have 3 doors in my house instead of 1, you're gonna say why, and it's like, well, it's just subjective. Like, well, no, you probably want more entrances to the house. Okay, so why do you think it's better for men to vet the partners rather than women?
I think men are more logical thinkers in a sense. I mean, if you're a father, you know what I mean? Like, why do we have this idea that fathers were evil or mean and didn't want the best for their daughters? And like, what I'm saying is, how do you think
hold on, you're just real quick, you're normatively loading everything. So I asked, like, what's the best thing? You go, well, they chose the best thing. What is the best thing? Well, it's the father knows what's the best thing. What does the father know the best thing? What is what are the things that we're selecting for? Like, what traits, what particular things do we think the father is selecting for that the woman is too stupid to select for? That's what I'm asking about.
Okay. So like, when women are young, we have a hard time differentiating between competent fearlessness and then fearless recklessness, I believe it's called. So like, if a man is just confident where he's like faking the funk, we'll buy into it when we're young because we just think that that's so impressive, right? Whereas our fathers probably would have been able to see through that and say, he talks a big game, but he doesn't actually have the receipts for it. When women get older, we're able to see through that a little bit better, and we're able to choose mates based off of that if we still have opportunity. But like, we just have this constant lens about how fathers used to be or were or even are today, that they're malicious and oppressive and that they wouldn't consider their daughter when they chose these mates. Have there been bad things that happened in arranged marriages? Absolutely, right? And I wouldn't say that like, that overwhelmingly happened in the United States of America. But I'm not sure that women are doing that well with the men that they're choosing of their own volition. And now, if you have a father, because you still choose as the woman, right? Now, if you have a father, he chooses, if he vets your husband for you, you can ask for that. You know what I mean? So it's more of a collaborative effort.
Yeah, this is like one of those. This is one of those cases where I have no idea how this ever ends up as gendered, right? When we say things like fathers know better than their daughters, that's just such a weird. Why not just say, like, parents will probably know more about their children's partners than the children will? That seems to be ubiquitously true. A father is going to know more than his son about a particular partner. A mother is going to know more than her son about a particular partner. I have no idea how this ends up as like a gender thing. But also, a parent's feedback on a particular thing is way different than a parent selecting a mate, right? Like, I imagine parents are always going to be giving feedback. They always do because they're parents. They can't help it. But the thing is there might be traits that the father selects for that the daughter doesn't necessarily want, right? Like, parents select for careers that their children don't want, right? For parents pushing children into like being lawyers or doctors, and their children would rather do something else. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's always good to solicit feedback from parents. I don't think anybody, like an older person is almost always going to know better than a younger person what's good for them in some regards. But I don't think that gets us any closer to like having old style like arranged marriages or parents actually like picking your partner for you.
Mm-hmm. I just think that it's the common notion that that was just always inherently oppressive, as if it's not possible that fathers had the best interests of their daughters in mind. You know, whether or not mistakes were made. Now, like if abuse happens, that's an entirely different conversation, because I have seen women who had arranged marriages and they came out and there was abuse and the parents were like, well, you know, we're not going to help you escape the situation. And I think that that's crazy, right? But that was more so the point that I was making, is that it's a bias to just assume that men were choosing not, you know, helpful, beneficial mates for their daughters. I'm sure that they loved their daughters.
Yeah, I don't think that
And
was. Go
that
ahead,
wasn't
Madam
my
Kennedy.
point, that fathers are always going to make a choice for their daughter without considering her best interest. I think the majority of parents want what's best for their children as a general rule. Regardless, even in a scenario where a father or parents arrange a marriage with somebody who is an upstanding citizen who is not abusive, that doesn't mean that they're going to be the ideal partner for the other person in the marriage. It could still be a very unhappy, unfulfilling, unsatisfying, depressing experience, even if there's no abuse, because maybe you just don't have anything in common with that person. Maybe you don't have a good chemistry. Like, there are things beyond just, well, they're not going to select somebody who's abusive. Like, yeah, but only the two people involved can really tell if there's chemistry and connection and mutual attraction, and that's why it's important for those two people to be the ones that are making the decision.
Yeah, I guess my question is about how. Sorry, I'll just do this real quick. I'm just confused about how sexual liberation plays into, you know, like because women are sexually liberated, their fathers stop choosing husbands for them. Like, I'm a little bit confused. I don't know the American history of that. I have like a Spaniard history from my own personal like lineage, but I don't understand.
Yeah, look, to the point that if sexual liberation ended child marriages or child arranged marriages, I'm not going to disagree. Do I think sexual liberation did that? I don't think so. But yeah, child marriages are bad. We shouldn't be marrying off kids. We should be letting adults choose who they marry. That's sure, baseline. One of the Wick, you asked about pornography, and this is something that I wanted to touch on, because so often, and I understand why this happens, but we look at sexual liberation and these topics generally insofar as sort of a gynocentric mentality of how does it hurt women. But I think pornography is something, and sex work, which I think are both have been contributed to by sexual liberation and I guess revolution. Both of these things, I guess in my mind, I fail to see how they don't hurt men, how they're not manipulative against men, because you literally have people, like in the same way drug dealers do, who are hijacking the reward centers that exist within men, like sort of like the lizard brains, and fueling that in ways that are detrimental to their customers. Drug dealers do the exact same. I mean, in my view, this is a harm, and I haven't really heard any strong, like from that particular element, I haven't heard any strong argument against it. We always and I agree that like sex workers can be manipulated by pimps and higher up people, and that's wrong. But that also exists in the drug trade, right? Like local level drug dealers are often manipulated or controlled by higher level dealers who then go back to the cartel and all this stuff. Sure, but they are still on the ground level manipulating their customers into doing something that's not good for them by hijacking those serotonin and dopamine receptors in your brain. That's not good. It's not a good thing and shouldn't be encouraged.
Does anyone here believe that pornography or sex work has had a positive effect on men, or are we all kind of in agreement that?
Yeah, I think it's based. I think it's cool. It's fun to masturbate to things. It's a recreational activity that we have access to today that we didn't have in the past. I think it's cool.
And I think sex work provides a lot of value to society, as it always has for like the entire existence of humans.
Can you give me an example?
But for example, actually, Lactoid, you're mentioning maybe people who have sex addiction or who are pursuing sex work, pornography in an unhealthy way, with completely skating over the other end of the client spectrum, which could be like disabled men, widowed men, elderly men who otherwise don't have any physical touch or sense of intimacy. And there's a lot of positives in providing that to any human. We all benefit from touch and from intimacy. It's a very useful service.
To me, this sounds like, again, like drug dealer apologetics, right? Well, I've talked with these people, right? Like in my career and online, people who sell drugs. And the first thing is, well, not all of them are addicts, right? But the reality is twofold. First of all, this industry preys and profits off of addicts, right? So every time you contribute to it, you're funding that. You're building up that industry and making it more powerful to take advantage of the addicts. But then on top of that, even for people who are non-addicted, you can't tell me that somebody wouldn't be better suited spending their time and money, especially if they're like a poor person or a working class person, spending that time and money doing things that are, grow themselves as a person, help their family. A lot of times it's married men that are doing this, which is causes marital strife, and infidelity is not a good thing. So I'm taking a look at the whole industry. Yeah, could you find like in a vacuum some perfect man that's actually benefited from doing this? In the same way that perhaps you could find somebody who's genuinely benefiting from like cigarettes, right? If I recall, there's one stomach disorder where if you smoke, it actually alleviates some of the symptoms. Sure, you can find me like an example, but the reality is for the vast majority of people who are sort of same thing with like smoking or drug use, sort of pushed into buying the service, it doesn't benefit them, right? The studies I've seen indicate that men who purchase sex work consistently rank themselves psychologically lower than other men, and they also rate themselves lower after buying sex work than before buying sex work, right? It increases risk of STDs, it's a financial drain, it's bad on every level.
You're describing every single hobby ever, right? Like, in terms of things that like it profits off of addicts, that's video games. Things where you'd be better spent doing anything else with your time, that's video games. Things where you might feel like shit afterwards, that's League of Legends. You can apply this across so many different. You can apply it to all of gambling. You can apply it to all of watching TV, yes, or on like almost everything that this can be applied to. The reality is like all things in life, things have a balance. If you drink too much water, you can die from having like an imbalance of electrolytes in your bloodstream, right? Obviously, there are going to be some negative things if you engage with something in a negative manner, but just like video games, just like TV, just like movies, just like every form of entertainment, you have to engage with it in a responsible manner. I don't think it's fair to say that this is intrinsic to an engagement with porn. If you're somebody that watches porn, has an orgasm, and goes to sleep, and you don't like get obsessed with it, then you've had a positive engagement with that hobby, same way you would with scrolling TikTok or watching TV. Or you can engage with it in a negative way, but I don't think that speaks intrinsically to the harms of the industry.
It is intrinsic. It's just not unique, right? So I agree with you. You can point to a number of other things. Gambling you brought up. I think gambling is a great example. Gambling is an example that I think is like a predatory industry. You have people who quite literally are trying to figure out how do we get people in and how do we take their money in ways that are disadvantageous to them, things that don't benefit them overall, things that kind of eat away at important structures in their life and don't make them a better person for it. You could point to things like, I think drug use is an example, alcohol to some extent, cigarettes. There's plenty of other things. It's not unique to sex work, but sex work is part of this. And I see so often that sex work is sort of like portrayed as a positive, when in reality it is a negative. And that doesn't mean like ban it, or that doesn't mean you can't do it, but it means just acknowledge that you shouldn't be doing it, and acknowledge that this is somewhat of a kind of disgusting, manipulative industry. In the same way, like the tobacco industry is, I feel like a disgusting, manipulative industry.
There's so many things here that you're bringing up that's like, it's just so sad. Like you said, like drug use. Drugs are awesome. There are so many fun drugs you can do and have a fun. Yes, they're so cool. There are so many fun drugs you can do and have a responsible engagement with them and have a fun time you can have on a particular drug that you can't have on anything else. The idea of writing all of it off because people can abuse it is, you've listed alcohol and cigarettes here. Some people abuse coffee. There are people, I don't know if this is true of every industry, but in jobs that I've worked, there are people that are fucking assholes in the morning if they haven't had their cup of coffee. If it was a meth head saying, I'm going to treat you like shit until I have meth, people look at him like crazy. But if it's a coffee addict who's like, if I don't have my coffee, I'd be a piece of shit, you're like, oh, that's fine. Like, I think there are tons of drugs, and I would say that's an unhealthy engagement with a drug, by the way. But like, there are tons of things that we can use in positive ways and in negative ways. Just because there are negative things to them doesn't mean that they're intrinsically bad. Again, look
at the aggregate, though. Look at the aggregate. Does coffee on aggregate, maybe you could show me like studies that indicate that on aggregate, coffee is not a good thing for the American populace to be doing. And if you could show that, then I would agree. The coffee industry is like not a good industry, and we probably shouldn't be encouraging it.
On the aggregate, off of this. It depends on what you mean.
On the aggregate, drugs are not good for society. And on aggregate, American society would be better without any drugs.
It depends on what you mean. Like on the aggregate, you could probably argue that caffeine's not good, that we should never have it introduced to us ever, that it should only be used sparingly, maybe. But a lot of people like drinking coffee, and a lot of people manage that drug use because it's a way that makes them happy. And we can argue that we ought to create this pure society where there are no vices whatsoever, or no recreational thing whatsoever. But I think that's unrealistic, and I think it's untenable. I think that the better thing is probably to say, like, there are going to be some vices, and we should engage with them in a responsible manner. Sometimes drinking is fun. Sometimes doing acid, MDMA, LSD, mushrooms, cocaine, whatever. These things can be fun things to do in occasion. Sometimes having a good cigar can be fun in occasion. But the idea that we're going to get rid of all these things that aren't like consistently self-improving our lives, I don't think is a realistic look for any human being.
I'm not saying get rid of them overnight, okay?
Well,
and
at all.
And for the people who have a problem, like, I'm perfectly fine with saying, look, you should like tone it down. You should do it more responsibly. But the reality is, you would never tell like a non-drinker who's like functional and don't start drinking, right? You shouldn't.
I would. Hell yeah! I'd say, let's fucking go drink it. It'll be fucking fun. Yeah.
Sure. So you might, but from what the numbers that I've seen, alcohol is not a good does not provide a good social function for America.
Alcohol provides an awesome social function.
No, it doesn't though. When you look at like all the costs associated with it, when you look at the crime that stems from that, when you look at all of the bad things in America that come from drinking, the diseases, the mortality rates, same thing with fast food.
What about the benefits
These are
of
things
alcohol?
that people, the benefits are dramatically outweighed by their negatives.
But
this is the same thing with sex work.
You're processing things as a Sure, but you're processing things as a robot. Like, you're giving me like these net negatives, and you're pretending like no positive exists. Like, you're completely discounting the subjective fundamental experiences being altered by every person. That there's a reason why people do these things, and it's not just because they love the negatives. It's because there's a lot of positives associated with them as well. But
I'm not saying you should be stopped from doing it. I'm just saying it should be discouraged to do things that don't benefit you in the long run, right? You're literally sacrificing your long-term well-being to satisfy the lizard brain, right? It's anti-human.
I want to get the other people, the ladies in here, and Allie's been chomping at the bit. So
yeah, Lactoid's been dominating this conversation. Get him out of here. True.
You ready?
So, hoe's gonna hoe. There's always been hoes.
Hell
what
yeah.
can you do?
Based.
Right? They come from broken homes, usually. So, like, we can't really do anything about them. Like, I know that people want to all-out ban, like prostitutes and stuff like that. Very wishful thinking. Super wishful thinking. When it comes to porn, I also believe that something that Christian conservatives will neglect is that it's probably kept a lot more sexless married men in marriages than it's broken up marriages. That's a perspective. I'm not arguing like morality in that sense. And the other perspective that I have on porn is the average age of exposure right now is 11 years old. Parents can't actually advise their children about porn or how easily accessible it is. It's my opinion that maybe one day Pornhub will probably be taken down because I don't think they age verify their actresses, and they're also not age verifying their users. The fact that this is legal
do age verify their actresses.
Right. Well, I worked in an adult couple store. I don't think it's that hard to get a fake if you really wanted to.
If you have to get a fake, then that means
the largest adult industry companies in the world, and most of them in this day and age are very good at verifying.
And also, if you have to get a fake, by definition, there's verification, because you need a fake to pass the verification, right?
They don't verify the users, though, right?
Yeah, right. So they're not verifying the users that are viewing it. That's the other ethical problem that it poses, right? I don't know.
No, that's your point. You brought up the actresses, but what you mean is the users.
Well, I mean, are we gonna like pretend like these actresses aren't
I'm just saying, you're making claims that are not true. You're claiming that they don't verify the age on Pornhub, and that's demonstrably, provably incorrect.
Also, I don't think it's true that the average.
Scandal, did they not? They had a scandal because they weren't age verifying some women that were underage.
No, I think the
scandal. Have they resolved that? Have they resolved that? Your statement is that they do not, which would imply that they are perfect.
There's been bars that haven't verified correctly. Like, everybody has problems with age verifications. That's not a reason to write off an entire. There have been casinos that haven't done it.
It's an issue. I was just saying that it was an issue.
It's an issue with everything, but it's not a mark against something. It's not like it's endemic to the industry or it's intrinsic to porn work that they're never going to verify an age. That's obviously not true.
Right. I didn't say never. I didn't say never. I said it was an issue.
Also, you keep repeating this thing. People that are actresses, I don't think have higher rates of like abuse or anything than other people. I don't think that's necessarily true. The people that are doing this,
that's an absolute false narrative.
Yeah, I'm sure they're like very mentally stable getting ran through on camera, like just the most mentally stable women of all time. Aside from that, the average age
you can't just appeal to emotion and hand wave it. I mean, the data is the data. I mean, if you have to say otherwise, that's fine.
Yeah.
But like,
just like the most upstanding citizens who like don't have anything holding them back in life are out there on camera, sure.
Or like the most upstanding citizens, somebody think that if they get fucked by too many dicks, they have no value as a human being. Like, who's more mentally sane at that point? Like,
I'm pretty sure sex workers rate pretty low on like mental stability compared to other demographics.
Like, I'm still kind of on the tip of the average age of exposure being 11.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna. I know, but yeah, we can get there. But I'm just saying that like you're very quick to write off. You're very quick to write off.
Children access to technology when they're that young. I think that's a really good option. Let's be more involved, hands-on parents overall. Yeah. Let's talk about childhood development programs being more accessible for low-income people. There are a lot of things we can talk about here that's not specifically relevant to pornography existing, but rather the fact that we need more involved parents.
Right. We do need more involved parents. They can't catch up to technology. And also parents are very much in denial about these things. I think that is true. If anybody's curious, watch this documentary called Childhood 2.0. My point is the average age of exposure for boys is 11, right? And just based off of that alone, I would just choose to never do sex work as a woman or a man. Both sexes. I would just never do it just because of that age of exposure. And there's no age verification of the user. I still think, that Pornhub scandal did happen. Did they fix it? Yeah, but they had to get caught first, did they not? Right? And there's other women too.
People address problems as it becomes something they're made aware of, and then they can take steps to resolve it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Yeah.
If there's a problem or some illegal activity and you find out that it's happening and you take actions to make it not happen anymore, that feels pretty responsible.
Yeah, all my friends that are married with PhDs that are women, just have the best lives ever raising children. They're on there.
True. And what are the wealthiest men in society doing? Taking flights to Epstein Island to go and kids. Come on, we can play this game of stereotypes all day. You can play the stereotype games all day. Your friends have PhDs. Are they going to be teachers? Aren't teachers the ones that molest kids the most out of any society? I hope they don't go anywhere near grade school. You can play the stereotype game all you want. But it doesn't get us anywhere unless we want to appeal to facts and fiction. There are a whole bunch of parts of the conservative mindset towards approaching female sexuality that, in my opinion, make you insanely mentally unstable. Right?
The idea that I'm all about women getting their backs broken by their husbands.
Yeah, but you think that it's a violation of the sanctity of life to use a surrogate womb. That's an insane proposition to me.
It doesn't have to do anything about a G-spot orgasm between a man and his wife.
It doesn't matter, okay? I'm just saying that you can't keep deriding and writing off sex workers when you yourself inhabit a whole bunch of areas that a lot of people, I think, could, with compelling argumentation, say are insane. It's not fair to just claim mentally insane women that are doing sex work. I know all these PhD women that blah, 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 blah. That's great, but that doesn't speak to the broader reality of what's going on.
Yeah, but I'm not sex positive. I'm anti-promiscuity and I'm anti-women commodifying their bodies because it's going to have implications for them later. Nobody buys mature porn, okay? I worked at a couple store for a year. Nobody buys that. The sun sets on that one day. What life are you going to be left with once you have wrinkles?
And what life? MILF porn is in
not
the
MILF.
top three
categories.
What life?
Mature.
What life
mature.
does?
Not popular. Not gonzo. Not MILF.
What life does every single male athlete have after their 20s or 30s? There are some industries that we partake in that have ultra high risk to the body or reputation, and you can't do them forever. But the compensation is usually there for. Women that are really successful in porn are compensated 20x more than they would be working as a barista at Starbucks. Same thing with men that endure CTE for football, or men that endure a lot of brain injuries for boxing or MMA. But people ought to be allowed to choose those careers if they want to, unless you have a really compelling reason for them not to. And an 11-year-old might look at porn sometimes as not a compelling reason.
Well, no, it's a compelling reason to try to stop that, right?
It's not a compelling reason not to work in the industry at all. It might be a compelling reason to restrict children from electronic devices. But I think TikTok is more harmful for children than porn. I would bet my life on that. 1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. I would rather that my son get caught looking at porn than he's on TikTok for 12 hours a fucking day glued to a phone. I would bet my life on that it has more negative outcomes for children to be addicted to scrolling content than seeing a which children have been hunting down in Target and Sears catalogs or in Playboy magazines buried under the bed since the dawn of whenever porn is. This is always. Oh yeah, the boobs and everything. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not going to deny that Chinese spyware is bad. TikTok is bad.
Or Instagram Reels. Or
yeah. I agree. Keep kids off the phones or whatever. But I do think there's something uniquely bad here when we're talking about exposing children to pornography, to sexuality at that young age.
I don't think anybody here is looking to expose children to pornography at a young age.
Real quick, we gotta let Blackwood have his say, then you can respond. Blackwood, please finish.
I'm just saying it's tolerating it. It would be similar to if a bar in your local neighborhood was selling beer to 11-year-olds, and you go into them and you're who's going to want to work at that bar? When you work at that bar, you're somewhat contributing to the problem.
Yeah, but right? It's children are gonna look, bro. I remember playing StarCraft Brood War maps when I was 12, where you drew Kerrigan naked on the mini map. It was called Kerrigan Naked. Kids are always gonna be this idea that it's uniquely damaging or whatever. Little boys touch their penises when they're 6 months old. Kids are. I know it sucks and it's weird to think about, but kids explore their sexuality at really early ages. I don't think porn is uniquely damaging to a person's mind. Where it's oh my God, God, my 12-year-old saw porn. It's
okay.
I don't agree.
I think porn. One last point. I do think porn is uniquely damaging, and I also don't like the argument of, well, kids are gonna be kids and get around the rules anyway, because the reality, like, we could use that argument for any kind of age gates that we have. Well, why cap bars at 21? Because some kid might sneak in with a fake ID. No, you want to first of all demonstrate to society that it's not good to do this, but also weed out as many kids as possible, because we don't want kids engaging in this behavior. Pornography is not good for people generally, and it's definitely not good for children, especially when you're 12 or 11.
Lloyd, your own example is really flawed, because by that same logic, because an 11-year-old or 12-year-old kid could get access to somebody's liquor cabinet and drink that we shouldn't at all have alcohol accessible in our houses. That's
bukkake compared to whiskey.
No,
bukkake compared to whiskey.
The whiskey is worse for you. Whiskey actually
So,
destroys your life when you're a child. It can destroy your brain and your development. Yeah. What do you mean?
Both are bad.
No, not both are bad.
This is a false analogy, though.
Oh, wait, well, hold on. First of all, you compared it.
Nobody should participate in pornography or sex work because a child might see it.
For Ali,
I can explain.
Hey, everyone, all of you, no one can hear you when you're all talking. I like this energy, but you got to go one at a time. Madam Genevieve, finish your point, then you can respond to Destiny can go, and we can get crazy again. Go ahead.
Your argument that nobody should participate in sex work, pornography, the adult industry because an 11-year-old might see it absolutely can apply to alcohol or any other age-restricted item. That's faulty logic.
Okay, so
I would just ethically as an adult, right? It's because it's the drug dealer thing. Okay, are you comfortable?
A dominant energy. I know. I'm too submissive.
I haven't really even been talking much about this particular subject, but it's just, do you want to add to a problem, or would you prefer to take away from it? I'm not going to act like hoes are going to be abolished overnight. That's not going to happen. There's always going to be broken homes. We can't do any, it is what it is, right? But
I'm just curious for you two. For Allie and Lecter, would you rather catch your kid, you find out that your kid has been addicted to alcohol for a year at 12 or addicted to porn at 12?
These are still both really stupid examples.
I'm just kidding. They're not stupid, because kids can find and get addicted to porn, and kids can find and get addicted to alcohol. Kids can drink at early.
You're right. I agree. Alcohol is worse, especially for young people. Okay. But here's where the analogy was misunderstood, right? So it's not you shouldn't I'm not banning the sale of alcohol because some kid might get into a liquor cabinet. In the same way, I'm not advocating for banning pornography because somebody might get their age verified and then let some underage kid watch pornography. What I'm saying is there's a standard here of, is the industry even setting a standard of keeping people out, specifically children who shouldn't be engaging in this at all. The pornography industry does a terrible job at doing this in ways that the liquor industry honestly is a little bit better, right? You got to be 21. You got to show a state ID if you buy liquor, if you go to a bar, right? They're actually setting restrictions. We don't want kids to do this because we recognize it's bad. But with the pornography industry, there's not that same level of appreciation of how bad it is for young minds.
We can actually, if we all as a society were better at paying for our porn, we would have much better control over seeing it. The problem is there's all this free porn everywhere that kids are able to access without any verification. On anything that has a paywall, you do generally have to verify.
Well, you can make verification even for free, and not let people or I guess not mandate that people are able to profit off of the weakness of men, right? Because that's what it is when you're making money off sex work.
They have
you're looking to have more regulations around age verification. That's really your issue here. Okay, cool. I also don't think
one of the issues.
Should be viewing porn.
Good. And until that happens, people in the porn industry are contributing to children watching this.
Participating in an adult activity because a child might stumble across it, you think should be banned. That's how we come full circle to the alcohol thing.
Yeah, and if you're having sex in your house and there's a kid walking around, you should probably close the door or lock the door or take some kind of effort to make sure they don't come in and see you. It seems to make sense to me. The porn sites don't.
I'm not denying that we should take reasonable actions to limit exposure, but you're seeming to claim that the entire industry should be done away with or punished, and I think that's ridiculous.
Okay. Well, gang, I want to respect everyone's time here. I know I said 6 to 8, and I want to kind of hold to that. We are going to have call-ins after this. You are all welcome to stay. I know there's some people who've been really wanting in to sound off. So if you can stay, I'd encourage you to do so. If you can't, I understand.
If you want to see more of my degenerate takes, you can find me on Twitter at Madam Genevieve. And I also do stream on Twitch. So I hope to see you guys there.
Allie, please.
So you can find me at Real Femme Sapien on pretty much every platform out there. I have a Substack as well. It's mostly a girl game because I don't think women are being taught how to attract and keep the men that they want or desire. So I am trying to assist women on that front. If you would like to capitalize on, setting yourself up for, future romantic success, I don't have all the answers, but I talk to women who've been married like 20, 30 plus years. I go out and I find these women who can give you guys the answers. So if that's something that's up your alley and you're curious about traditional values, you can check out my platforms.
Lactoid, please.
If you like my takes, you can find me at Lactoid TV on Twitch and YouTube and Twitter. Thanks.
My YouTube is youtube.com/@wick-tv. You could also find me where I do most of my things on Twitch at twitch.tv/WhickTV. We have conversations like this all the time.
Lactoid, I'm really happy that you brought up at the end the point about like closing the door if you have kids in the house when you're having sex with your partner. I'm not sure how what you're saying is a critique of the porn industry online. It sounds like an internet problem that you have an issue with, not like a porn specific issue. So I'm just interested what you have to say about that.
Jesus.
So it is partially an internet issue for sure. But I mean, look, the pornography industry exists primarily now on the internet. Yeah, and it's like in the same way like bars not checking IDs. Like, is this a problem with like the liquor industry? Yeah, it's also a problem with like the smaller subset of the bar industry.
It's not really equivocal, is it? Because when you talk about sex work like IRL and stuff like that, obviously there aren't many 11-year-olds that goes to brothels and get accepted or have sex with hookers. But if a lot of the porn industry and OnlyFans and sex work is online, then it doesn't seem like you can attack the industry. You can complain about online not having proper guidelines, but that's like, and we need to restructure the internet for that. I'm not sure how it's a unique critique for the porn.
But that's the way the industry is marketed, is through online. Like, that's the only way people get
Allie,
the media.
I have a question for you.
Wait, can I respond?
Wait,
I'm gonna respond. Hold on, I'm gonna respond to that right real quick. So.
Okay. Yeah, I was waiting and you didn't say anything. Sorry.
Okay. So, I think this primarily is going to be an issue with pornography on the internet because, yeah, it is a partial internet problem, but that industry exists on the internet and continues to push what it pushes, being well aware of the fact that a lot of its customer base and a lot of its consumer base is children. Does this apply as much of a problem to like non-internet based pornography? Probably not. I do personally know multiple people who, as underage, hired prostitutes. They don't really do a lot of vetting. From what I understand, I don't have stats on like how this frequently this happens. I know it does happen, and it's like a problem when it does happen. And then I guess you could also say, well, that's just a problem with people having sex with underagers. It's not even a problem with like
prostitution. I don't have to stay here, right?
I suppose like you could boil down to like every problem within an industry to like some greater problem. But the fact is that industry is involved in the problem disproportionately.
Okay.
Well, I disagree with that, but can I ask Allie a question? Wick, is that okay?
Yes, you may. One more
Okay,
question.
Cool. Allie, you were talking about what you think masculinity is and stuff like that, and we brought up stoicism a little bit. So I have kind of an inflammatory question for you. Do you? I'm warning you in advance.
That's fine.
Cool. Do you think men who kill themselves are failing as men?
I mean, I think anyone who kills themselves in some way, shape, or form has failed as a human. Right? Like, it's not like they put themselves in... It's hard to explain, right? Like, they find themselves in those situations for reasons, and it breaks my heart. And basically, they die without any hope. So I would say that objectively, it is some kind of an L. It's not a fun conversation to have, but that's what I would say about that. But I would argue that I've probably had more experience with suicidal men than anybody on this panel, saying that I served in the military and I worked with men.
I was also in the military for.
Oh, okay. There you go. Yeah. So I've dealt with those folks a lot more, and I would argue that a big issue is that men cannot go to other men with their problems or their burdens, or they don't feel comfortable to. So I'm not sure how we get from like stoicism to suicidality, though.
Okay, because I was just gonna explain that. I feel like a lot of the prescriptions you made about what being masculine is kind of contributes to the exact issues that make it so men end up killing themselves at higher rates. So like not getting help as much, not having as much support, like emotional support and engagement with other people, feeling the need to suppress their feelings, not seeming weak, not crying, all of these things which end up leading to men being more isolated and therefore killing themselves at higher rates, except for the fact that they also use guns.
Oh man,
which
I'm ready to go
helps.
gym, guys. I'm ready to.
That's like a really big factor is the gun
guys.
use in the first place.
Yeah.
I would argue that men don't feel comfortable expressing their emotions because we say that their emotions are wrong because we expect them to look like women's emotions. They do not look like women's emotions. Sometimes they look a lot different. And they should, again, they need to be able to go to other men with these issues. For some reason, men don't feel comfortable going to other men. And you can say like my prescriptions, they're making men suicidal. I very much doubt that. I think there's a lot that goes into male suicidality that does not have anything to do with me running my mouth on a stream.
I did not mean to imply that your prescription are causing men's suicidality. I just meant that with your framework, it seems clear that like the way you conceptualize masculinity are the exact things that deny men the ability to get help.
That's such a woman take, you know, like we have these prescriptions for what we think is hot in men, and so therefore they kill themselves because of this. That is not why men kill themselves. That's not why.
I actually also thought it was interesting that you kind of equate like, if I find a man hot, then that somehow means that that is the metric that we should use, right? My body feels that it's hot when a man earns a lot of money. Therefore, that is what makes a man a man. And I just see it as a very weird metric to use, personally. But I'm a woman, so I make silly women takes, you know?
Well, I mean, that just wasn't a very good take, you know? And that is something that I think that is a female lens. Yeah, no, that's fine. But I would just say, like, show me the swipe facts. Like, who are you swiping on? You swiping on brokies?
I'm not swiping. I have a boyfriend.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, I mean, you've selected for someone.
He cries in front of me, though, a lot, so I might dump him.
Very cool.
You might. I don't know.
Yeah, probably.
Katie, thank you for calling.
Good to meet you.
I will see you later. Okay, Lime, did you have a question for anyone here?
I was talking to Destiny about the manhood thing. I think that the traits that women typically look for men, you know, older, taller, making more money, is that they want the man to be a protector.
Just real quick, do you have a question or is this a statement?
Well, I was just challenging like his view on that the man. Yeah, I think that that's either consciously or subconsciously they do want the man to be that protector. I don't think that has just gone away just because we live in like our modern society. I think it is deeper than just they're making more money.
I mean, yeah, if you want to feel that way, then you can feel that way. But you're just like sending men down a road of like getting perpetually. Like the reality is that just being a protector is not going to be enough to get any woman in a relationship with you because nobody's realistically making selections like that. There's going to be a whole...
Wait, women are looking for older, taller men that make more money?
When you say women are looking for taller men, you're describing 99% of men are taller than like most women. So men are already typically taller than women. So I don't know what that means. The average male is like what, 5'9", and the average woman is like 5'4". So
but it's that they want that. It's not that like if a guy came up to them who was shorter than them, they would say, "No, I don't want you," because
that might be the case. And if a guy came up to you with one leg, yeah, you probably also wouldn't want that guy. Like people are going to make
like you compare one leg. Come on,
because the chance of being shorter than a woman are probably pretty low. I imagine it's probably what, like 10% of guys or whatever, or lower.
No, it's nowhere near that.
Are shorter than the average woman?
Well, the average man is 5'9" or 5'10", or like 5'9.5". Hispanics are bringing us down based. But it's like 5'9" or around there. And the average woman is 5'4". You're like multiple deviations off the normal male height to be shorter than the average woman. So when you say like a woman is looking for a taller guy, that's going to be true of almost all men. Like that's just by default.
But no, I think what he meant is not like taller as compared to the woman. Obviously, I mean that's a big part of it. But just taller, like the taller the better, like over 6 foot. Like
I mean maybe, but I mean like same thing for guys. Like the bigger the boob, the better. The better the pussy, the deeper the throat. I mean like there are going to be things that people.
Reasons for that.
Right? Well, it's also just not entirely true though, right? Because like the majority of people are within like an inch of their partner.
The majority of people are going to be in the majority of these qualifying factors. Like, people might gravitate towards higher things if they could, but that's going to be true of literally everybody. But if you're a guy and you're 5'9" and you think you're not getting a woman because you're not tall enough or because you're not making enough money, chances are there are other things in your control that you could definitely make improvements on that are going to get you in that area. If you're not 6 foot, it's not like the world is over. That's just not the case. But also, spoiler alert, most guys
that's not what I said. I said that women want these things. I'm not saying if you're a guy and you're not taller than her, you can't get her. I'm saying the reason that women want these things because they want the man to be the protector role.
Yeah.
That's
but women don't want taller and taller and taller and taller and taller men. They want a man that's taller than she is. And what Destiny said is that most men are taller than most women. So like the only variable that maybe isn't understood here is what is the mode height of women? Like, what is the most common height of women as opposed to the average?
Wait, you're saying that like a woman's not gonna, your average woman's not gonna have any preference between like if she's 5'8", like a 5'9" man, or like a 6'2" man?
So there's diminishing returns. There's diminishing returns, right? So after you're taller than a woman, how much more taller than you are than her means very little, and there's other variables she's going to care about way more, which is why almost everybody, statistically, is within an inch or two of the height of their partner.
But there still is returns though, like up to maybe diminishing, but there's still returns, which indicates they have a preference for that.
But there's when you guys say preference, the problem is that when you guys speak of preferences, you make these sound like they're massive preferences that are make or breaks for dating. Like, all else equal, if a woman could have a 5'10" guy or a 6 foot guy, all else equal, she'd probably gravitate towards a 6 foot guy, sure. But in terms of like, what are they selecting for dating? Height is probably not even in the top 5 or 10. Maybe for fucking, sure. But like, there's gonna be a band that you can fall within. If you're like at least 2 to 3 inches taller than the woman, you're probably fine.
But you're already granting it, giving them 2 or 3 inches taller than her. Like,
I also want
the average man is 4 inches taller than the average woman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or 5 inches.
4 inches is like a pretty significant amount, but like, sure, you're taking one element, but like what he's saying is that you're taking like there's a bigger pie of like reasons why women are attracted to men, and so like height's one of them. But like if you're tall, if you're wealthy, if you're like really physically fit and like muscular, like maybe each of these represents a relatively small percentage, but combined, you're going to be way at an advantage than a man who doesn't have these things.
Yeah, if you're taller, wealthier, stronger, more handsome, of course. If you stack enough of these things, who's denying that? Wait, what?
But almost nobody.
There's a reason why all these things are like make up a part of the pie, and that's what he's trying to say. Like, there's like fundamental reasons why. Like, if you just look at height, it's not just height, but all of these things combined are all based on like kind of foundational like reasons and like perceptions of men being the provider, men being the protector, and as they can fill those requirements more and more, they're just more successful.
But almost nobody is all of these things.
Yeah, and the problem is the problem is that you guys are holding up this ideal of like a very tall, very wealthy, very handsome man. That's like such a minority of like most men are going to be tall enough to fit that role. Most men are going to be strong enough to fit that role. Most men are going to be, probably because men still tend to outearn women, are going to be fitting that role. Like, these aren't the big things that you probably need to focus on as a man. This is the problem with the red pill ideology, is it's sending men down the wrong path. The average man is hitting most of these things with very little effort. The average man is taller, stronger, whatever, probably looks decent enough for a woman. There are other parts of their life that they're not filling that hole in. And the idea that you just need to be more tall, more masculine, more strong, more wealthy, only like 1% of men are going to be such outliers there that they're going to be able to get a girl on one of those traits.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, it's not, the red pill is just what socially maladjusted men find. Like, what you're saying is true, but they're not going to hear it. I've had this point multiple times on my platforms. The men that want to understand it, they'll get it. But the men that just don't want to hear it and want to blame the world for why they can't get a woman, they're just going to keep that thought in their mind.
Yeah.
Hold on. What's being overlooked here, what is absolutely being overlooked here with that red pill ideology is that entire thing, to me as a woman, feels like a complete cope of hating the men who are 6 foot rich, all of the above, and this ideal man that's such a small minority. To me, it just looks like you absolutely despise that guy, and I'm personally happy that guy is getting what he wants. My concern is that we're all getting what we want as best as we can, as long as it's something that's good for everyone. And one of the things that keeps getting overlooked, and was overlooked in this panel too, is that the vast majority of women have reported that they like men who have something that men are saying is female: nurturing, We like men that are good with pets and good with children. We absolutely adore it. And every single survey, we keep saying it. And it's like everybody's ignoring us and going, oh, they just made that shit up or something. That's something we actually want from men. And that would be considered somewhat feminine, would it not? We want men who like kids, who like animals, who like pets. Like, look at how many more these men who have dogs in their profile pictures, look how much more they're favored, because we know that you're a nice person and that you like, people or anybody who's vulnerable and needs our help. So why are we overlooking that?
So I think the reason why it often gets overlooked is because that advice was given to men for a while as well. And the problem is that if men only embody those things, it also falls flat, because it seems that a lot of women seem to require a minimum level of masculinity before they have the feminine traits, right? So the feminine traits are also what they want in a partner. They want a guy who seems to embody both of these things. The problem is that if you only give them the advice of be more feminine, a lot of men don't have these masculine role models, and they're struggling to even have a conception of masculinity in themselves, that they're focusing on the one, because it does seem to be the case that a lot of really sweet soft guys tend to fall pretty flat with women because they don't have the necessary prerequisite of masculinity.
I don't think I don't think the issue here is because people keep saying that. I don't agree with that the problem is men are too feminized, because then what we mean when we say that is people are saying feminized implies all of these horrible weak personality traits. When I look at the average guy that society would consider feminized, it's not like the guy is very emotional and he might talk with a little lisp and he's kind of gay, blah, blah, blah. It's usually a guy that's a fucking emotional wreck. And that's not a feminine trait either. An ultra feminized guy that's having problems with women probably embodies a lot of traits that women that have problems with men have. A guy that's overly emotional, that is completely and totally unstable, that can't have healthy relationships or conversations, that gets too obsessed or not obsessed or attached with all these different things. These are not embracing his femininity too much. It's just being a train wreck.
Could we
rephrase?
You
can just say that's excessively feminine behavior, though.
No, it's not excessively feminine, because any woman that inhabits those traits, usually if you think of really feminine stuff, you'd think these are positives. But I don't want a woman that's at all in that direction of being super unstable.
Right. Yeah. But I want to point out, but my thing that I'm pointing out though is just that what we're doing here is we are saying what masculinity is, and it seems like we have intentionally, when it comes to red pill ideology, we have intentionally deleted fatherhood, which is a massive portion of manhood and our understanding of men. So it's obviously you can be a man without being a father. You can be a woman without being a mother. My point does remain, though, that we don't ever want to be in a position where fatherhood or traits that women have consistently said they want are being completely deleted from the discussion over some weird little cope that it begins to just target happy men who happen to have the luck of the draw genetically, and now we're going to hate on them. That's stupid. I don't understand that at all.
So I feel like we can completely just get away from this problem of diction with feminized men and just swap it to emasculate men. There's nothing masculine about you. It's if we say masculinity is having emotional control and being able to handle your shit and yada yada yada, because women can do all of that and we can call it masculine just for ease of access or whatever. If you have nothing masculine about you, you're a mess. You have no order. You have no control. It's the yin and yang. So is it possible to just use that diction instead of feminized, emasculate?
I think you can, but the issue then is that people, I get so triggered when people gender some things that are just so obviously these are your fun. For instance, we say my man is so masculine, he washes his ass in the shower. No, you would say it's basic fucking hygiene that everybody should have, female and male. That's not a masculine trait to brush your teeth in the morning, right? But then people will say things oh yeah, he was very feminine and that he was crying or an emotional wreck every time I saw him. I was bitch, I don't want a fucking woman that's like that. I don't think anybody wants a woman that's crying and screaming all the time. So it's just weird when we talk about that in terms of masculine or emasculine. It's more, there's got to be fundamental things that most people have to have together in life, and then we can talk about masculine or feminine traits past that. But a failure to be just a basic functioning human being, to call that emasculating or unfeminine is just very strange to me, I think.
So do you just not think that there are masculine and feminine things, though?
There are absolutely masculine and feminine things.
Okay.
Well, I think a metric that's often missing from this conversation is maturity, right? A lot of things that we're talking about is maturity or immaturity.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to things emotional, sensitivity and expression, I think we still do typically categorize that as a femme thing, in large part because of we'll often see femme people that are more willing to express their emotions, not because I think it's obviously a biological thing. I think a lot of trans women would even report this, when they start going on things like estrogen and progesterone, they start experiencing heightened volatility, particularly with negative emotions. So they experience a lot greater intensity levels of sadness, but a lot less anger, whereas anger seems to oftentimes be a way that more often masculinely emotions expressed. But I would say in either case, if you're a dysregulated dysregulated emotional person. You're being a little boy or a little girl. You're not really being like a man or woman necessarily.
I want to give space for Allie here, and I just want to lime mashed potatoes. We're gonna move you out and make room for someone else and do some cycling. But thank you for being here.
And I can head out too. I just have one question for Allie when she's finished.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fine.
Yeah. Well, I was going to respond to some of the things you said. Okay. So, number one, acting childish would imply like a concept of neoteny, which seems to only be attractive in women. That's why it's more accepted when women are emotionally dysregulated. Also, we're kind of given a pass because of our hormonal cycle. Men can be emotionally dysregulated as well, but I would think that that is probably why it's attributed as like a feminine quality. I disagree with that. I think if you act childish, you act childish. Aside from that, when we're talking about like red pill ideology, I'm probably the one person who's like talked to majority of these red pill content creators, not just online, but like behind the scenes, and I've met them in real life. So it's like the libertarian strategy for sex, okay? There's like no morals, there's nothing. It's just a sexual mating strategy for men. That's why you don't see a lot of fatherhood discussed. However, if you go look at old blogs, because the manosphere is like 20 plus years old, if you go look at old blogs, there is content on fatherhood and how to maintain frame as a father and a leader of a household. And I have like a lot of access to some of these things if anyone's curious. But that's why you don't see an emphasis on fatherhood. Aside from that, reproduction rates are what they are. 50.1% of women are childless by age 30 in the UK. If we want to see more of an emphasis on fatherhood, we probably need to start having more babies. As for like, there's feminine traits and masculine traits. These are things that have shown up in all cultures, through all history, through all religions. So, and they're just gendered, and that's okay. And we all have it within us. That is what
the sermon part aside. The sermon part aside, though, for me, one of the most appalling things that I saw today was you did bring. I mean, good job on bringing the woman hate with the tough titty to Jen, and oncology and wanting to have children. I mean, good job there. But I want to actually focus on the man hate, because something that you said about being wet when a woman sees a man could die for her is one of the most disgusting and heinous things I think I've ever heard in my life. I don't know about you, but I actually love men enough. I want them to be alive. I can't actually love a corpse, okay? I don't know why in the world.
Keyword willing.
Physically, I don't know why in the world you would get physically turned on and tell that to the public that your husband could die. Bitch, he's your man. Do you not give a shit about it? And
keyword willing.
And then when you turned around and you said that maybe you can have a son who will protect you. I mean, if there's a bear coming at you, you're going to throw your baby infant boy in front of it? Like, what the fuck, bitch? Men are not disposable shits. What the fuck?
Well, I don't know if that was a question.
What's the question?
Yeah, why would you dispose of your man? Where is that man hate coming from?
Willing. Keyword willing. Willing to. Like, willing to.
Oh, can you just like mute her or something? Like I can't even respond.
Cycle her out. We're gonna
what?
Yeah, I'm cycling out right after this.
I want to address something she said. First of all, it was willing.
I was the one that was addressed, and I was the one that got cursed out. So you might want to wait a minute or two. Okay, so in any case, basically, there are just things that are attractive in men: being physically strong and being capable of ending an aggressor's life. That's it. Would I throw my baby son in the way of a bear? That's honestly retarded. I don't know how you get from point A to point B. Also, I'm pregnant. I don't know anyone else who's married and pregnant on this panel. So maybe that's why you're so dysfunctional and online calling into a panel right now. Maybe you just suck.
You dumb cunt. I have kids.
Okay.
The point remains.
Oh, I'm sorry for them, because then their mom is dead.
No, the point continues to remain that you actually said that women get wet at the thought of their husbands dying for them.
I don't think I said that. I think MMA fighters are hot and they make a lot of women drip. That's what I think.
She said men who are willing to engage in self-sacrificial roles are attractive to women, not men who literally are killing themselves.
Men dying are women. Men dying are not hot to women. I'm sorry.
Bro, stop! Please, just stop. You want soldiers that are willing to die. You need to be willing to die to fight a war, right? The army doesn't want the soldiers to die, but they need to be willing, right?
Sure, I was one. Thanks.
Stabby?
What does that mean?
Thank you for calling in.
She was a soldier. That's what she said.
Yeah, I had the same thing.
Thank you for your service.
No,
were you willing to die?
Stabby?
Yep.
Can we get some
That's
solution in the
good.
chat, please?
That made you a good soldier.
All right, guys.
Call in later. Bye-bye.
I mean, my husband breaks my back regularly. It's fabulous. I don't know about anybody else. I'm having... what the hell?
Okay, 10 flicks, send in one more. Flow Trace, what you got for us?
Hi, Wick. Well, I actually think there's a bit of a stronger argument to steel man's heavy's position, but that's not why I called in. I wanted to ask, I guess this is more of an open question. Well, listen, let me get my question out first before I steal man's one I don't even necessarily agree with.
Lego man.
There was a lot of discussion in this panel, and I think conscious content sort of got at it a little bit, just a little bit ago. When we talk about feminine traits versus masculine traits, there seems to be some disagreement about what those are, but there also seems to be some disagreement about what those ought be. And I'm just curious if, like, I guess Destiny or anyone else here that has like a stronger position about what how we ought use those traits. How do you sort of make that determination as to what something is or isn't, whether or not something is or isn't feminine, and how does that play into sort of a prescriptive question of how we as a society ought view those things?
Okay, here's how I view things. Okay, it's a high value male that makes a fuck ton of money and has his whole life put together. Okay, this is how I view things. 95% of what we are should be shared between men and women. We should be confident. We should be emotionally stable. We should be hygienic. We should be able to live our lives in an independent, assertive fashion where we are navigating the world as confident, strong people. That's like 95% of people. Now, there are some sex differences between male bodies and female bodies, and I think from there, we can get some additional spice. So men tend to be taller and tend to be stronger than women. So when women look at men, those are traits that they don't necessarily have, and the more they get exaggerated, sometimes the more fun and attractive that is, right? Having a guy that has huge python arms or is like 6'2", it's really hot because men tend to be tall. That's an exaggerated trait. Having a woman that's like 5'1", or having a woman that has big boobs or exaggerated hips can be fun because those are like feminine features and those are cool exaggerations. I just think it's weird when people hyper fixate on these minor differences that we have between each other rather than like the massive similarities that we all share and try to make those the defining features for how we choose mates. That's how I feel.
Good answer.
Like, I don't. What's wrong with masculinity and femininity and wanting these things in the opposite sex? Like, why is this?
I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's weird to gender.
No. I'm not. I'm just asking the question. This isn't like about you or anything like that. I'm just like, what's up with the demonization of that?
Because I think along with the wanting masculine and feminine things, people start. I think we had it happen a lot in this conversation. People will just gender the weirdest things. Like people are like, oh, I want a confident man that doesn't cry. Like I think most people want confident women that don't cry. Or even when you say like you mentioned earlier that like emotional dysregulation can be attractive to a woman. I think in a very fetishized like BPD sense that's true. But then when you went on to say the next thing, like people like women get a pass because of their hormone cycle, that is absolutely not true.
No, I think that they do. Like I legitimately think that they do. I don't condone it, but I think that's what happens.
No, I think men are driven crazy by women when they're being emotional at PMS times. I don't think any man finds that attractive or any man wants that or whatever. Like I think that focusing on these like I think this weird attempt
doesn't mean it's not feminine or masculine.
Sure, but I think the problem is people are trying to gender too many things that like most people should share qualities of.
Hold on. Okay. So about the crying thing, like I just think that women on average cry more. I think that we often try to say that like men's emotions should look like women's emotions. I think they might look different. So if we're looking at like that emotions wheel with all the different colors and all the different names, I made a joke with my husband the other day. I said, I wonder what it would look like if men made it. Right, like what would their emotions wheel look like? It'd be completely different, in my opinion.
Sure.
So that's one thing. But I was talking about neoteny, right? Where acting childish for a woman can be attractive sometimes, whereas like acting childish as a man is not considered attractive.
But again, it's also like hyper. Like I hate that I even know this fucking example because it drives me crazy. I think that men that are attracted to childlike women are cringe, but so many women fall for the fucking 35-year-old skater boy man-child aesthetic from men. It is so fucking cringe, and all of you motherfuckers should know. I'm 34, and it was a huge thing in my generation, and some of them still do it. Where there are these 32-year-old guys that are massively balding, that are disgusting, but they have like that skater boy, like little boy aesthetic, and women fucking
Mitch
love.
Jones.
Wow, I was trying to name names, but there are women that get obsessed with that shit too. So I don't know. Like again, I think that we're still like hardcore gendering everything. I don't really think it's that gendered. I think that we have way more commonalities than we do differences, in my opinion. But
it just sounds like your argument is that there are good traits and bad traits.
Yes, maturity is what Erudite said earlier. What I think is true. Maturity is something we should. Yeah. Sorry.
But isn't there like a masculine form of maturity and a feminine form of maturity?
Yes, that would be kind of the detail that I would add. I think like in the case of like you're right. Nobody wants a super emotionally volatile like partner in general, right? But that doesn't mean that we can't gender the trait throughout, because we can talk about healthy traits and toxic traits of both like masculine and feminine. And the reality is like to me, I don't really care which traits we lump into these things, because I think masculinity and femininity is like almost exclusively like a social construct that we use to like simplify language. So I don't really care what we capture factor into these things, as long as we realize that like men and women can exist in both of these things, right? There are ways that like women can be childish that might be gendered as well, that like men can still be childish in that way. I would just say that in that moment there'd be maybe the opposite gender construct in that moment.
Yeah, and I think it's, and for the exaggerated traits too, it can be really fun to play into those roles with like otherwise mature people. It's fun to be a man and to watch a horror movie with a woman and have her get scared and like cuddle up with you when you're watching it because she tends to come.
You confess.
Like
you confess.
I've never said anything different, right? Like those little differences between men and women can be like the spice of life. Like that's fun. It's fun to have a woman like hug you and look up to you and like have her when she cuddles, she's like on your shoulder, whatever. Like there are some of those things that are fun, those exaggerated differences. But pretending that we're so different in terms of gender just drives me fucking crazy. Yeah.
Okay, that's speaking of driving people crazy. Okay. It drives me crazy when you do this. Okay, when you talk about the engenderment thing, right? And then you say, okay, people engender all sorts of stupid things that shouldn't be engendered. Therefore, engenderment is stupid. Why do we have to gender these terms? The fact that people engender things wrong doesn't mean that engenderment is stupid. It means that people
I just gave you examples of where the engendering is fine.
I know.
What I said before is there are some natural differences between men and women in terms of like neuroticism, in terms of how emotional you get, and some of the exaggerations of these things can be fun to play around with, right? I don't know how many guys have experienced this, but you can find the most feminist woman in the fucking world. She loves to be fucking dominated in the bedroom. That's a stereotype that has been absolutely true in almost all of my life, right? People like to play in these roles, and it's fine. Just recognize that these are like the spices and flavors of a relationship. They're not the fucking focal point, the most important thing, right? Again, I think we are massively similar. Yeah.
People have been engendering things though in like a super deep, important, spiritual way for like 6,000 years, right? So it's probably reasonable to suggest that this has made it into our psychology. Not that it's transcended reality and changed the fabric of like ontology or anything, but it has ingrained itself in our psychology. I think
but the issue that I had before, but this is the problem. The problem is right now. Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm just gonna do a little cycling out. So, curious content, Flow Trace. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for contributing.
Thank you, Wick.
We're gonna move you out. Appreciate it. Carry on.
I think the issue is that we've come up into a very weird spot in history that I think is unique now. Maybe it's not. Maybe everybody's felt that way. But women have subsumed so much of what was traditionally masculine, being able to without consequence and being able to work a job. And I think that I feel like if you would have asked 50 years ago, well, how would this have worked? People would have said, women will probably make roughly the same sexual choice. And I don't think women will want to work because honestly, we thought women were math retarded and are too stupid to go to class for physics. Like because they're women, they're dumb, right? But that's not the case. Given these two little changes, education and jobs and birth control, we're starting to find out, okay, well, some things we thought were just biologically ingrained in us were way more socially kind of doctored or constructed than we originally thought. And if women have done all this, like they've got their femininity and now they've completely dominated this masculine role too, where they're earning more money, outperforming us in school. Well, as men, now it's like, well, what are we going to do? The answer can't just be more masculine, because that can't be the answer. It's not going to be the case because just having a paycheck isn't going to be enough.
I completely agree with you, but I don't think the problem is that women are becoming too masculine or that the gender roles are changing or whatever. It's that women are unironically becoming better at being masculine than men are. Like I think men are bad at being masculine and they're bad at being feminine. And like the reality is a good partner is not one note, right? The most extreme feminine person is not like beautiful, wonderful, amazing, responsible trad wife. It's neurotic freak that can't get out of bed. And the most ridiculous one-note masculine man is not Giga Chad superhero Audie Murphy that fights the war all by himself. He's antisocial freak that goes to prison.
Gotcha. I want to give space before we go. I want to give space to ASD. He's been silent. If he has nothing to say, I'm going to kick him and make room for more people who will contribute.
Can I go next after him?
Well, we'll continue the conversation. You can interject as you will. ASD, you got anything, or are you just here?
Yeah. So I've been sitting on and I've listened to a number of like the porn debates, especially. And I know it's gone a little off topic because you guys have, while in the waiting room, have gone to something else. But so in my profession, one of the things that we do is we work on what they call mobile trauma service. So we go see individuals who have trauma where they're at. So we tend to work like overnight shifts. We might work like 11 to 7 because most people that have pretty significant traumas are sleeping during the day and up during the night because there's some fear and issues like that. So here's the thing. You've done all these porn debates. There's been like 100 million porn debates. And one of the only things that everybody talks about is the classical idea of pornography, stage pornography, where they go to a set. But the bigger issue that we're running into now when working with kids and adults is the pornography of individuals that didn't sign up for it, that aren't getting paid for it, didn't consent for it. And I do agree with what Destiny said, is that one of the worst things that we're running into now is I think that TikTok is way more way more toxic than traditional porn set. Here's money, we're paying you for your services. Because there's a lot of people now that are being entered into what would be considered the porn industry without even their knowledge. So there's kids, there's
like
adults,
porn?
all of it. We're talking about.
But is dancing on TikTok porn? Is that like a girl dancing on TikTok and
Absolutely.
guys like?
It can be.
I don't know if we can define that as porn though. Porn isn't just everything you jerk off to.
It. Yeah, just because you sexualize something doesn't mean it's porn.
Yeah.
But that's not where it starts. So
yeah, but you're defining dancing on TikTok as porn. That would be like because a couple people jerk off to pictures of like dog asses. Now any photo of a dog ass is porn, and it's like, well,
this panel's porn.
Not true.
But the casting
somebody's
couch,
jerking off.
Hold on, let me explain. The casting couch is the girls that dance in their little pajamas or their sweatpants. That is the new casting couch. The casting couch is looking and finding adolescents or young adult women on TikTok or Snapchat and then saying, hey, I will pay you $500. I will send you a Venmo. Do you have a Cash App? And that's the new cat.
What is this?
This strange thing just happened. I just DM'd Kelly Jean to confirm that she's still platonic with Destiny. And then she said on stream that I did that as her answer. She didn't DM me back. So now I'm listening to see if she's gonna update it, which I don't think she is.
Oh my god.
Of porn to anything that can theoretically get your dick hard, then all porn is fine as long as it's not of a minor.
But it's not if they're not consenting or getting kicked.
That's the issue. You just can't broaden definitions to mean anything. Then nothing means everything means nothing.
Like there's a difference between porn and someone dancing, right?
Yeah, you're outlining a sexualization process that I think probably everyone would agree that there's this element of as we normalize sexualization, people are going to be more comfortable with it. Probably people who maybe end up in the porn industry now wouldn't have otherwise if they weren't exposed to earlier sexualization while they were younger and stuff like that. I'm sure there's an element of that kind of career drift that occurs, but that doesn't mean then that the stuff before porn is also porn. Right?
Just real quick, Destiny, if you could check your DMs, I had a question. But anyway.
So I kind of have to agree a little bit.
Okay.
I don't necessarily know if, again, I don't want to say TikTok dances are pornography necessarily because they're certainly not, but there is an issue in society where we're hypersexualizing everything. I mean, advertisements are completely selling sex 100%. We're having children exposed to these things at an extremely young age. Children are going and emulating sexualized dance moves to try to put something out there, and I don't want to say something like we can't or we have to outlaw all pornography like some people were trying to say earlier, but we do need to have a societal focus on, hey, we're hyper over sexualizing absolutely everything, and people are getting hurt as a result of this. Our children are watching these things, they're growing up with these influences, and then they're becoming incomplete adults that aren't capable of functioning in normal society anymore because they've got this weird social media brain concept that's kind of infected them from a young age.
That's true. All these men are for the streets, bro. They gotta stop fucking sexualizing everything. They gotta stop beating it. It's wrong.
I do tend to agree with you on that. I mean, again, guys at some point are forgetting completely how to interact with people because they don't know what normal social interactions are. We've had a number of people come on here and say things like, well, if you're tall and you need to be a giant person in order to get anybody's attention, and it simply isn't the case. I mean, that's not how social interactions work.
Okay, I don't think anybody's saying that you got to be tall and ripped to get attention. I get what the point is, and it's weird that it's being said, and it was kind of said a lot by everybody before, and just people didn't address it. What we're saying is that it matters, right? Being tall, being ripped, being wealthy, being charismatic. These are all factors that go into you being an attractive person, and especially an attractive man. And you can say things like, well, these are human traits. These aren't masculine traits or whatever. But to me, that almost feels like, going to a diabetic person and saying or a diabetic person comes to you and says oh, I need insulin. And your response is well, everybody needs insulin. Well, yeah, I guess that's true. But this person is having an insulin deficiency. This person is having a crisis where they don't know where they're having a difficulty fitting into the world right now. And they especially need help with this because it's the role that they because of biological reasons are somewhat predestined to fill. require these characteristics more so than a woman does. So I don't understand. Like, it's not an argument to me when I'm like, I think the bother thing was a good thing that was said by Stabby. The dog thing was a cope. But I think the red pill has a problem when it comes to like its intent in terms of like getting men to be sort of like sex crazed, like animals. But if they're saying go to the gym and like become like a successful person in your career, what the f wrong with that?
I think
why
because
can't
for
that be
most
the
men
standard?
that's not going to do much. I'm going
to
do some cycling. Okay, so ASD, thank you for your contribution. Move you out.
So there's lack of response as a win, personally.
Wait, the reason why that advice itself is really bad is because kind of what Stabby pointed out is that just being masculine is typically insufficient for most long-term relationships. Just being masculine will get you sex a lot of the time, but a lot of women are interested in settling with long-term relationships with men who have both feminine and masculine traits, just like a lot of men are to some degree looking for the same in a female partner. So the issue with giving men the advice of just be more masculine, it's only 50% of the pie. You're just underserving them by saying, especially because in these circles they say just be masculine and being feminine is bad. That's the problem in these
so if we started a circle that removed the word just and says be more masculine, like fulfill these like expectations, then is it okay?
I think the two things.
I'm not saying being nice.
There's
like being nice is important.
If there's 3 buckets that men need to fill, where it's masculinity, femininity, and maturity, the one thing they need to focus on is probably maturity. Next is probably femininity, and then next is probably some level of masculinity.
Femininity.
Oh my giga chat.
Like
yeah,
being
true.
able to have conversations with people, being able to be emotionally available to people, because you're probably already taller than her, you're probably already stronger than her, you're already fitting like most of those things. The idea that just becoming more masculine is going to fix some shy, unconfident, unsuccessful dude's life. Like, I'm sorry, but like an auto mechanic that goes to the gym and is otherwise an asshole is not going to start to lay a whole bunch of like high quality women. It's not going to happen.
All of these marriages that end in divorce, right? It's not the most common thing that you hear the wife go basically, yeah, I mean, his dick game got weak after 15 years. It's like, he stopped listening to me. He stopped telling me I'm, he wouldn't dress himself anymore. Like, he didn't try.
Oh, okay, of course. I believe you that they say that, and I believe you that this is going to be like some aspect of this. I'm not even disagreeing. That's going to be an element here. Now, would I consider that to be like femininity? I also don't really like the idea that like the focus here is to just get laid as much as possible. That's not why I think these prescriptions should be made. And again, and in addition to that, it's not just like being stronger compared to her, being taller compared to her. It's about like constant self-improvement, getting stronger, achieving more financial success, and to some extent, being stronger and being like more successful than other men. It's not just necessarily like being better than her. Part of it is trying to improve. Now, if you can't make it, that's not. Well, like, what do you think is like as a character is like more important? Like,
listen to how you even
self-improve.
Listen to how you even set that up. Being better than other men. Like, you're setting this up like it's a fucking like race or competition between other people.
There is a competition in the sexual marketplace.
Then fundamentally, the ideology you're selling is going to fail 90% of listeners because not everybody can be a winner in every metric, right?
Yes, and it's the same thing with like the economic market. But what we do is we encourage people who are currently out of work and not being successful to like go and work on yourself, try to get a job, try to do this. So are some people going to fail? Of course, right? But the moment that somebody shifts from like, okay, I need to improve myself in order to like achieve greater success here, and shifts towards this, well, there's nothing I can do about it, right? You just changed from like a up and coming person to an incel. Right?
I think what you just described there is exactly the whole problem. Women are not like the economic market, right? That's what the red pill gets twisted. What the economic market wants from you
women, it's sexuality.
Okay, well, I'm going to say women. So what the economic market wants from you is it wants you to be better than anyone on the goddamn planet at one thing. It wants specialization. What women want is for you to be just good enough here, and just good enough there, and just good enough here, just tall enough, just a big enough dick, make just enough money, yada, yada, yada. It's all these prerequisites. It totally is, bro. It totally is. That's why.
Wait. Let me address this particularly, because there's a hyper-specific industries in which super specialization can be important in like the economy. Sure, there's plenty of jobs in which having a number of skills is going to be critically important. In the same way that for any kind of social relationship or like romantic relationship, there's going to be women who want like one specific thing. Like, oh, I don't care about these other things as much. I want like this person to be specialized. And you also
that's like 5%.
Sure, I don't know what the percentages are. All I'm saying is that it has the same dynamics as a marketplace, in that like when you're not being successful, like the intention should be to improve yourself and to become more competitive in the marketplace, as opposed to just like be okay with mediocrity and like to fall into this the slime pond scum.
Can I pose you a hypothetical? Do you think, so if we've got the 3 pots that we've all agreed on, and most guys, like Destiny said, are probably a 5 out of 10 of masculinity because there's a good chance that they're stronger than her just by merit of testosterone. There's a good chance that he's taller than her, right? So he's like a 5 out of 10, and he's probably likely out-earning her, especially if they're in the similar education level, right? So let's assume he's got a 5 out of 10 on masculinity. He's got a 1 out of 10 on femininity, and he's got like a 2 out of 10 on maturity. The issue with like law of diminishing returns is your advice says get your 5 to a 7 in masculinity. And it's like, it would be way easier to put less effort to get the other 2 pots to 5 out of 10 as well. And that in and of itself will massively jump you out in the market of being way more interesting, because like Nick said, a lot of women aren't just looking for a niche man of like, oh man, I just love this guy. He's extremely hyper masculine and that's it. What they tend to say is, I admire him on a number of different metrics. He's driven, he's competent, blah, 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 blah.
Just as a quick question on your next point, just real quick. I'm scared to even ask this.
Allie's trying to get it.
Oh, shit. Okay, go for it.
Allie,
right.
Yeah, shut up, Destiny.
My bad.
I don't know what red pill content y'all are watching besides what the algo pushes, right? It's like a drug pusher, okay? It's like whatever's gonna shock you. Obviously, that doesn't have a lot of helpful things for men, but like what the red pill does push as well is game, and nobody brought up game. Okay, that's social skills, that's social couth, because there's a broke fat man right now somewhere in America probably running a rotation. Like, they exist, and the red pill does talk about that. The other thing too is like, we have women that always want to talk about like, oh, I want a masculine man, but I want him to be gentle. The easiest way you can do that: 1, sleeping next to him as a woman. 2, sleeping next to him as a pregnant woman. 3, having a freaking baby in the house. Like, we want to force these things. We want to make him softer. You know, like, his hormones are going to adjust to an infant in the house.
That is the worst, most untrue thing I've ever heard in my entire life. You will never. Let me give this one thing,
You don't
okay?
think so?
No.
That's
I
true,
will.
though. There's
There are
data.
very few things
But
that I
there's
will
data.
say resolutely. There is not. Okay, do not ever have a child to change your man. That is like probably the worst advice I've ever heard in my entire life. If you have issues with your husband prior to that,
that.
Well, no, but I'm saying that like there are a lot of guys who like. Here was the question I was going to ask before, because we talk about like these types of like people, these types of men that we want to get in relationships with, and this maybe you guys are all from merger families with me. How many people here feel like they have like a hyper masculine father? Do people feel like their fathers are like ultra hyper masculine? Is that like my dad like did like Air Force stuff? He's like, okay,
yeah.
Like,
here's a problem though. It's not a good thing.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing that he's hyper masculine.
I would like to like just be able to talk to him and not be strawmanned every fucking 5 minutes.
I feel like for at least.
Like, hey.
Oh, go for it.
Hey. Okay. Like, objectively, a baby does reduce a man's testosterone. And it's not like you have the baby to change the man. You have the baby because it's the next logical step in the relationship and you both feel comfortable. It's just that a lot of women complain about attracting these masculine men and he's like way too tough. And it's like, if you just followed the natural course of your relationship and you didn't overthink everything, then you would see that softness come through almost immediately. A lot of the women that I know that are married who end up, reproducing, having children, or just being pregnant, they see a weird change in their husband. But a lot of us are simply just not having babies to see this other side of masculinity. I mean, if it just was happening, it would be apparent. But I think there's just so many childless people out here that's presenting an issue.
I think you're right, Allie, in a big way, and wrong, I feel like, at least, wrong in a small way. Like, so I think every good guy, regardless of how messy his life is, will adjust, right? He's going to do what he needs to do when the time arises. He's going to be a father when he has a son, right? But that doesn't explain all the what the fuck do you cook? What's the little term?
Will, are you just here to cook? Like, did you just come on here to cook?
I was thinking that maybe I would show some feminine values as a man here. That way we could show that there's.
I'm going to show you a masculine value.
Wait, no.
Okay, we're gonna
That doesn't explain all the deadbeat dads, right? That it's like they.
Yeah, but let's talk from like the context of a reciprocal marriage, right? Like, I understand the degeneracy that goes on, and like single mother homes. Like, I came from one. Like, I got it. But I'm talking about like these very normal, that we call them old school, these traditional values. Like, y'all ever think that sometimes they work? They might work for like a considerable amount of people.
Almost everybody probably.
Well, but they're also dysfunctional for a considerable amount of people too.
Are you here to just sit, or are you here to talk?
Well, I've been trying to talk, but I haven't been ready. So, but if I could go now. So I think that generally what we're getting at is that society has moved to education, like women doing better in education, and the workforce has generally shifted to service industry and healthcare jobs versus agriculture and like factory jobs. And so men feel a general dysregulation in society. And I've been thinking about solutions? Like, I know there's individual solutions, but what can we do systematically? And I was thinking, at least and I'm going to say affirmative action. I know it sounds cringe. I'm talking when it first happened, not present day affirmative action. Not present day. Present day is trash. But in terms of what affirmative action did for women in education in its first, let's say, 20 years, maybe we can do that for men in education, and then they can get degrees, or I don't know, find a place in society, get the income to compete with women, and then build families, and then we're all happy again.
I think the issue there, though, is the problem isn't that men aren't getting into university. It's that they go to university, fall apart, and don't graduate.
I also think that part of that is that the structure of education has always been
It's
tailored.
feminine.
Exactly.
I'll agree with that.
What we do about that, I don't know. I mean, really, you just restructure all of education, and you could make masculine education that suits men and women that tend to be more masculine, and the same for women. But I mean, that just would be a lot of work. So I don't know how you would approach that, but I think that's an interesting concept that did work for a good period of time for women that maybe could be used for men. But I also think that a lot of men would be like, well, that's a woman thing to say, and men don't operate that way, or wouldn't feel good about having, like, I feel like maybe men would see affirmative action as a handout and not feel good about that
ruined.
as an avenue for
Zerka
them.
got
Does that
in.
make sense?
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, I've had an overwhelming abundance of access to scholarships being a woman, but also being Latina. And I just don't see the same access for men. I don't know if there's like an argument against that, but I think that if there are men that fall into risk factor categories, I'd be perfectly content to like increase their access to scholarships and things like that.
True.
I think the trouble, though, is that it's like broadly money's not the issue. Broadly getting into school is not the issue. I think broadly is men just suck ass at school. They're just bad at it. And I think this like is a kind of like a kill shot to this red pill argument that like men are just so good in facts and logic, and women are stupid and silly creatures. And it's like, so why do men just fail school all the time?
Well, maybe one of the reasons is because there's like less of an emphasis on career success and more of an emphasis on like
ruined. Zerka got in. Zerka's gonna liberal position.
I mean, this isn't really it though. Like the issue
These
is that
fucking
like
cowards.
particularly in in grade K to 6, we see that we often have like a lot of schooling that seems to cater more towards the way that like girls tend to express in learning, particularly, which is internalizing.
Yeah,
By the time they get to high
you
school,
should just wait till she's done talking.
Right.
Why did you wait till she stops
Why did you bring
talking?
this guy in here? What did you do?
Wait, oh my God! There's a guy who actually is gonna embarrass the shit out of all of us. We better kick out Zerka.
no. That's
We
true.
needed
do
a
have
honestly
afraid of?
we needed a red
Steve?
pill alpha Chad to balance the scale.
What are you
I
afraid
agree
of,
with this.
Steve?
I want to hear erudite. Shush.
Okay. So the issue is that like by high school, we actually see that this flips. And in many ways, the education actually tailors a little bit more to like what we see like young men's brains are like geared for at that age and less towards girls. The problem is that like by that time, the damage is done, right? A lot of like really important like relationships to education and to the world is formed in like these really early formative years. So a lot of men like hate school by the time they're getting into like grade 6, 7, and 8 because of like the way that we characterize our classrooms.
You say a lot of men hate school, but did you know that most ADHD is triggered because at 4 p.m. a child goes home to an abusive home where their parents are arguing, and it immediately triggers their psyche to being very erratic. It's not just, oh, I was born with ADHD. It's your dumb liberal institutions that actually don't address the problems. The problems are from home, but you guys want to play parent. You dumb liberals want to play parent. And look, what did that get you? The highest depression suicide rate in history? Your progressive retard rainbow flag experiment? It turns out it's not working. So you're just like spending time trying to save lives. You're failing miserably.
Good contribution.
I cook them on the ADHD research. Let's go.
I mean, like, think about it. If you look at the cast, look at the cast, look at that guy in the fucking, look at this guy, Nick. Nick looks like he's soulless, like a zombie.
What do you mean I look just like you, Zerka? What are you talking about? We're literally spitting images of each other, only I'm 5'6" and you're 6'3".
Yeah, but you're 5'6" because you're further away from God.
No, I'm 5'6" because I'm further away from the equator. There's too much gravity up here in Canada.
I mean, think about what you guys are saying. You really want to blame every institution. I'm not on your side where it's like, oh, this is crazy. The only problem you have with anxiety and depression is separation from church and state, and you know it. That's why Alcoholics Anonymous, they don't tell you, hey, let's science you. They say,
okay, I gotta go gym, guys, because it's like gonna close. So it's been fun.
Miss will not give you science. They'll give you a higher purpose, because the true psychology is not your gay 20 years of progressive bullshit. The true psychology is what lasts for thousands of years. That's the first book ever made. That's Christ.
Why do you
Wait, hold on, Zerka, are you Christian?
Am I Christian?
You said Christ, right? You said Christ,
no,
right?
think about what you're saying. Your whole moral compass is.
I'm
based
Christian.
on-
I'm Christian. I'm asking
Yeah,
you if
no,
you're
no, no. But even if you weren't, your whole moral compass is based.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't
It
matter.
doesn't even matter. Your whole moral compass is based off Christianity.
Yeah, but
That's
I'm also
why-
Christian, right?
raise
So
your-
my
raise your-
whole
who's an
moral
atheist?
compass is that whatever
Would-
God says is true, right? I'm like a
Yeah,
I'm
well,
a,
check-
I'm a
I don't.
Yeah,
I'm a
God,
theorist.
God said, if you want a good psychological upbringing, you should stop trying to pretend.
But are you
to be
Christian,
a-
Zerka? That's what I need to know.
I want to give
Absolute.
Ally some space here.
Am I a
Right,
Christian?
What are the chances that you're actually going to receive help? And then we have like a high rate of like mental illness among mental health practitioners as well. That's a common trope that you'll hear from medical providers. So like I do think that probably the progressive way that it's been so far with the rate of suicidality that we have in men. Maybe there needs to be there needs to be reform. And I don't know what that would look like. I don't know if it's like men taking psychology back or like creating an equal psychology, like affirmative action, but on the professor side of things in psychology, I don't know.
We're gonna do so just before we go on, before I unmute Zerka for a little bit, and we're not gonna keep him long, just one or two more statements. Dripping and Q2, did you have anything else to say? You can cycle me out.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming, by the way.
Yeah,
So-
thank you.
So
All
when you
guys.
say when you say affirmative action for professors, you mean like making room for conservative professors, I'm guessing.
You little coward bitch.
I'm just
You can't handle a debate. Press the button faster. Press the button faster.
Real quick. Zerka, do you have anything
question,
Hold on. Did I not provide? I didn't provide value.
You, some type of value, yeah, I think so.
You know
You
how
made a good
boring you
argument
guys
against
sounded
masculinity.
without me? You
Bro,
guys sounded
Zerka-
like you were gonna kill each other without
Your
me.
shoulders are the only value I need on this panel, bro. I think you need a cam up.
You're hold on. You're telling me my argument is invalid because of why?
I don't think anyone's even said that. I mean,
Yeah.
Allie literally
I
said
was
she agreed
agreeing
with
with
a
you,
large
dog.
portion of your argument.
Yeah, nobody said your argument's invalid. But I do think you should cam up. I think you could add more value, even more, if we could see your
No
face.
face, no space.
Wait, what was the argument? Could you just repeat for the panel?
Here's the argument that
No, don't ever repeat it. We heard it. Oh God, we heard it.
It's that
Raise your hand.
America is without God. That was the argument.
No. It's
like
God.
that?
It's the world without God. But raise your hand if something happened to you as a child that formed your shape of thinking and it was a sexual experience.
Jesus Christ.
Come on, man.
Why are you being shy? What are you guys, adults?
I want to
Well,
give
no, I-
Q2
Private.
I want to give
I have a
Q2 space.
theory I was
Q2
gonna
had
let
a-
According to
Go ahead.
Freud,
Then I have
it
a
should be 88% of you raising your hands.
Hold
to
on,
something-
you can't be quoting those degenerate
I'm done.
philosophical
I don't need any
psychologists.
more of that in my
Oh.
life.
Studying hookers.
They're already
That-
dinner.
Bro, I wanted to ask what he was
but
drinking.
you had a good point, Nick. You had a good point. Like, what would affirmative action look like? Like, I'm not.
For professors,
I think yeah, for professors. Because I think it's just such a feminized field right now. I don't know what that would look like. I think it needs to be liberal and conservative men, and I think that there needs to be conservative and liberal women in the field as well. I don't know if you can affirmative action. What is it? A diversity of thought. If you could, that'd be cool. I don't know how you would prove that, and I don't know what the repercussions would be. But yeah, I'd like some balance because I would be afraid to send my son to a therapist if I'm quite honest, because I don't know like how indoctrinated these folks are. Like I would very much have to rely on my husband, and I think that that's sad. These men should have access to good care.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly completely agree with you. I think a lot of our problems would maybe be better if we could get, I don't know about more men, but more masculine role models in education, especially in primary school. I think even more so than university.
Yeah, that's probably a pretty good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like how do you get more conservatives in college in general and stuff like that? That's like
Well,
kind of
there's a couple things.
liberal.
There's like the liberal like pressure like pushing out conservatives in academia, but you also have a bunch of conservative like large bastions of conservative culture who just like hate science and think that like academia is bad and evil, right? Like I remember growing up Christian and going to university and being warned not to go because they were going to like steal me away. And so it's like there's this real piece that like there isn't a lot of space for conservative people in the academia, but also there's not a lot of conservatives like raising their kids to want to pursue things like knowledge and education.
True. My state recently did like a whole survey on the public university system here as to opinions towards other political beliefs, and like not being welcoming to conservative opinions is an understatement. I think over 70% or over 80% of conservative students, I think for professors it was even higher, but for students, they felt uncomfortable expressing opinions. And on the like left-wing students' perspective, over 70% wanted to actively censor conservative opinions on campus. They didn't think it should have, like even be able to be expressed. So the culture has absolutely shifted towards a very like one-sided ideological narrative.
But that's a cultural issue more than anything, right? Like that's not necessarily left wing or right wing dependent. That's just a cultural norm to suppress any ideas right now that aren't part of the current narrative that schools are trying to push.
Well, so here's the thing though, the conservative students in that same poll like did not share this opinion whatsoever. They were extremely tolerant of other people sharing their opinions, and they didn't want to censor them. Right?
Sure, but the issue is like oftentimes when you're the minority experiencing like the oppression, you're going to feel more and more like oppression is bad. The issue is like when we had reverse situations where we had a lot more conservatives in power, a lot more conservatives in like education facilities, they were actively trying to suppress like counter ideas. This is why like in many ways people tried to push Christians out of school and public education for kids, because Christians were extremely like pushing, like my school was a Christian school. We literally didn't learn evolution, which is insane. There's no good reason for us not to do this. So like this is mostly like the song of like the oppressed, which I don't think is dismissing the conservative issue in academia. I'm just saying that like there isn't evidence to me that conservatives are just way more open arms. It's just they're open arms now because they know what it's like to be like crushed.
So that's a good point. But conservatives also, like on at least the ones that in the survey, like on principle, believe in freedom of speech more and believe more in people's ability to express themselves. So
Sure.
is part of it like a siren song of the oppressed or whatever? But at least from like I think there's a deep ideological element of this.
Sure,
As well.
but even if we look at like personality markers that map onto these traits, right? Openness to experience is one of the best predictors about whether you're going to be liberal or conservative, almost exclusively. And conservatives are very low in openness to experience. So even from like personality factors, it's not suggestive that like conservatives are just much more natural. Now, the duty to freedom of speech is the thing that's going to offset them, which is great. The issue is that like there is no evidence to me that when conservatives are the majority, that they're just much more open in free speech.
So I don't even think conservatives are for free speech. I know that they like to pontificate that, but I just haven't really seen true evidence of that. I think in some aspects, I think conservatives would like to pull back, because people forget this. You know, you used to not even be able to curse on public radio. Like that was the conservative position. It's only recently that it's had to flip, where the liberals were censoring speech, so conservatives are like, oh, like now we're free speech. I don't think that's true. What I think conservatives get frustrated about with the pushback on the left, they're like, well, if you want academia to be more in your favor, then you guys need to flood the schools. It is so hard to sit there and just be like a public whipping post in academia if you're verbal, if you're extroverted, and you share your thoughts. I just graduated last year. I went to school in the Midwest, y'all. 76% white county. And just because I was a conservative Latina and I was in the military, okay, I was having like weekly panic attacks on campus. Like that is how angry these folks are. And Gen Z is not, like, I don't know how old you guys are on this panel. Gen Z is not like the students of student past, okay? Like these people will shout at you if you say empirical data or truths that are not political leaning at all that they don't like. And that happened to me. And it's like, you got me all the way messed up. You're a whole white liberal telling me how to be brown. Okay, like it's weird. So like I just think it's not right, or it might not be fair, and life isn't fair, that's fine, to say like, well, conservatives need to take back academia. Why would we? You know, maybe it's better if we just like try to pursue things in the private sector. Because I would not recommend for conservatives to go to college if they're going to be extroverted and share their thoughts, unless you can just great rocket.
No, that's
I don't
right.
see how
Wait,
conservatives ever
it's
could
been
take
fun.
back it.
I'll see you
Oh
later.
yeah,
Pick up
Destiny,
again.
thanks for coming. Thanks
Good
for
luck,
coming
guys.
by.
Bye.
We'll go.
Okay. Jesus. All right. I love you guys. It's been fun. Fuck. We had things we are going to do today. Tomorrow, we're going to choose a second streaming platform. I'm thinking it's going to be Facebook, okay? You have the opportunity to persuade me off.